Hey guys, tonight we're doing something a little different. You're not just watching history, you're walking straight into it. Specifically, you're stepping aboard the RMS Titanic and not as a wide-eyed third-class hopeful or a harried steward or lugging someone else's leather trunk. No. Tonight you're first class, darling. Silk-lined privilege, bespoke luggage, and a view of the Atlantic that most people would only dream of, if they even knew such a thing could exist. You've got a suite that costs more than some homes, and a wardrobe that needs its own room. But here's the thing, you probably won't survive this. Yeah, sorry. The champagne flows, but the iceberg is waiting. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, tell me your city and the time you're watching, just curious who else is about to board this floating palace with us. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing in the port of Southampton. It's April 10th, 1912, around midday, and despite the chill in the air, the docks are humming with anticipation. Your gloved hand rests lightly on your hip as you watch stewards load your trunks, yes, trunks plural, onto the most famous ship the world has ever not quite sailed. Around you there's a buzz of lace parasols, polished canes and fur collars. The salty air mixes with coal smoke and the distant chime of a ship's bell echoes off the white hull towering above you, like a building turned on its side. RMS Titanic. Even the name sounds theatrical. This is the maiden voyage, the biggest, boldest, most expensive floating object humanity has ever created. If you're alive enough and rich enough, this is where you want to be. The elite aren't just travelling, they're showcasing, mingling, posturing, and you lucky thing, are right in the middle of it. A smartly dressed White Star Line official checks your boarding pass, barely glancing at your name before waving you aboard with a bow. First-class passengers are allowed on through a private gangway, separate from the middle-class rabble and steerage hopefuls already swarming below. As you step inside the ship, your shoes tap against the polished floor of the first-class entrance hall, and for a moment you just stop. This isn't a ship. It's a manor house on water. No, more like a floating Versailles. Warm, honey-coloured oak panels stretch high above you. There are crystal chandeliers swaying ever so gently with the ship's subtle movements, and a carved grand staircase with a wrought iron and oak balustrade so ornate you feel like you should tip it. A steward appears, practically materialising from nowhere. "Right this way, miss," he says, or "sir," depending on who you've decided to be tonight. He takes your overcoat like it's made of spun sugar. You're led through what seems like a dream. Plush carpets, gilded columns, and the scent of fresh paint and wax polish, mixed with the faintest hint of ocean air seeping through brass-framed windows. Your fellow passengers are a sight to behold. There's Colonel John Jacob Astor IV, the ridiculously wealthy inventor and real estate mogul, arm in arm with his 19-year-old wife, Lady Duff Gordon, fashion designer and certified source of gossip, is adjusting her gloves as if she's about to sketch a design mid-air. And of course, Benjamin Guggenheim is strutting about with the confidence of someone whose furniture is custom-made in 5 countries. These people aren't just rich, they're story-rich, and you're one of them now, at least for tonight. You pass through the first-class reception room, and again it's hard to remember you're aboard a vessel. High-backed chairs in velvet, polished wood that could pass for a royal library, and ceiling mouldings that look like someone actually read all those Baroque design books. There's a small orchestra warming up in the corner. Violins, a cello, and what looks like a harp, just casually hanging out between potted palms. Everything smells like roses, mahogany, and just the faintest whiff of coal drifting up from somewhere below. As you make your way to your cabin, suite, because cabins are for peasants, you pass other passengers being greeted with more stewards, more hats being doffed, more trunks being cracked open to reveal ivory-backed hairbrushes, feather boas, and in one particularly unbothered case a jewelled opera mask. You can already tell this isn't travel, it's theatre. Then you arrive at your suite. It's on B deck, prime real estate. The corridor leading to it is softly lit and lined with panelled walls in white and gold. Your door opens with a smooth click and, oh, you need a second to process. This isn't just a room, it's a hotel inside a ship inside a fantasy. There's a full sitting room with a fireplace, not a real one of course, but convincing enough in its electric glow. The furniture is Louis XVI style, upholstered in pale damask. Your bedroom features a proper bed with a carved headboard, not the cramped bunks of lesser classes. There's even a private bathroom with a marble sink, running water, and a tub that could fit 2 people, though Titanic is all about discretion, probably. And here's your quirky fact for the evening. One first-class suite had its own private promenade deck, just for that room. That's like getting your own balcony on a cruise today, except instead of margaritas and a plastic chair, you have brass railings, teak decking, and a view that costs more than an Ivy League education. There's something uncanny about how quiet it is here. Just the muffled thrum of the engines below, the occasional creak of wood settling into itself. You could almost forget you're floating until you glance out the window and see the blue-grey English Channel rolling past, low clouds smeared across the sky like oil paint. Your steward returns with tea, Earl Grey in porcelain. You sip, half listening to the clink of fine china, the sound of distant footsteps on thick carpet. Somewhere below you, the steerage passengers are singing in tight little bunks and handing babies across narrow walkways. But here, up here, time is syrupy and slow. Even the ocean seems to behave for first class. Later you'll unpack, change into something entirely inappropriate for seawater travel, and go mingle with other guests who each secretly think they're the main character. But for now, just stand here, in this ridiculous, beautiful, unsinkable moment, because things are about to get very real very soon. The door shuts behind your steward with the softest click, and suddenly you're alone in what may be the most outrageously unnecessary room ever floated across the Atlantic. You glance around again, just to be sure you're not hallucinating. Nope. Still here, still surrounded by silk drapes, hand-carved mahogany, and a chandelier you're positive could concuss someone in the event of turbulence, assuming ships have turbulence. You walk slowly towards the bedroom, and honestly, calling it a bedroom feels like an insult. It's more of a boudoir with a minor god complex. The bed is wide, with crisply pressed linen sheets embroidered with the white star line insignia. You run your fingers across the duvet, downstuffed of course, then over the polished headboard, which features some kind of carved pastoral scene, possibly cherubs, possibly sheep. The lighting is soft and warm thanks to the electric wall sconces that flicker ever so slightly, like they're adjusting to the idea of being at sea too. To your left, a writing desk with a crystal inkwell. Ahead, a wardrobe bigger than some apartments, stocked with hangers of twisted brass. There's even a little brass bell on the wall labelled steward, in case you suddenly realise you need someone else to bring you a fresh cravat, or fold a towel into a swan. Which, granted, wasn't standard yet. But if anyone could have invented the towel swan before it became a thing, it was a bored Titanic steward with 10 minutes and a bar of lavender soap. Now, let's talk about what's not in the room. For one, no radio, no telephone, not even a clock. It's quiet in a way that 21st century brains find borderline spooky. The hum of the ship is there, a low, constant purr from the engines deep below, but other than that, it's just the subtle sounds of your own movement and the soft lap of waves brushing against 46,000 tons of arrogance. You slide open the door to your private bathroom, and again, what is this? The tub is porcelain and built into the tiled wall with hot and cold faucets clearly labelled in ornate script. The floor tiles are a black and white mosaic, probably designed to make you feel morally superior just by standing on them. There's a marble-topped vanity with a silver-edged mirror, a little dish of rose-scented soap, and towels that feel like they have never even heard of mildew. And yes, the toilet is here too, enclosed behind a small door, because even in 1912, first-class passengers didn't like to mix their opulence with the more pedestrian aspects of biology. But the thing that really gets you is the sheer scale of it all. Every part of this suite, from the furniture to the fixtures, was designed not just to impress, but to remind. To whisper to you constantly, you've made it. You aren't just crossing the ocean, you're doing it wrapped in Edwardian excess, with stewards who know your shoe size and butter knives for every conceivable dairy scenario. Now here's a fun fringe fact to chew on, while you unpack your imaginary diamond tiara. One of the first-class suites, known as the Millionaire's Suite, had not only a sitting room and a bedroom, but a private wardrobe room, 2 adjoining airfants' quarters, and a bathroom so lavish that rumours swirled about gold-plated fixtures. These weren't cabins, they were floating penthouses. As you begin to explore the drawers and cubbies of your own suite, purely out of curiosity of course, you realise that even the smallest detail has been curated. The writing paper is watermarked. The drawer pulls are carved ivory. There's a soft, bristled clothes brush resting neatly in a tray by the wardrobe, next to a tiny shoehorn with a mother-of-pearl handle. It's like someone wandered through a royal townhouse and just scooped up anything remotely portable. Your luggage is already here, stacked in the corner like a Louis Vuitton display window, monogrammed obviously. You flip open one case and reveal rows of neatly folded evening wear, day wear, afternoon tea wear, promenade wear, and whatever the hell sportswear meant in 12 wear. If you brought less than 25 outfit combinations to events, you're basically camping. Now, of course, you didn't pack this yourself, that's what valets and maids are for. Your personal attendant will be along soon, no doubt having just finished tending to Lady So-and-so's peacock feather fan collection or fluffed the pillows of someone's emotional support Pomeranian. But for now, you take a moment to sit on the edge of the bed and breathe it all in. And here's where we dip briefly into the scholarly debate section of tonight's stay. Historians can't quite agree on how individualised the service really was in first class. Some argue that the passengers could expect near royal levels of attention, a wake-up tea delivered at a whisper, assistants dressing for dinner, even having their bath drawn at precisely the right temperature. Others point out that with over 300 first-class passengers and fewer than 100 first-class stewards and stewardesses kept, things may have been a bit less Downton Abbey and a bit more hotel that's short-staffed. But hey, if you were rich enough and tipped well enough, chances are your socks folded themselves. You rise and glance out the back of the window again. The ship is moving now, gliding down the Solent, leaving England behind. There's a strange kind of melancholy to it, the knowledge that for many on board this will be their last view of home. Not that the first-class passengers are feeling especially sentimental. They're already planning luncheons and comparing invitations to Captain Smith's private dinner. As you turn back to your suite, the ship gives a gentle lurch, just enough to remind you it's alive beneath your feet. Your balance shifts for a second, but the plush carpet cushions it. Somewhere down the corridor a bell rings, the air has changed. It smells like linen, brass polish, and the faintest whisper of the sea. Your suite hums with quiet confidence. You're not just sailing, you're starring in your own Edwardian fantasy. Your room is the stage, your costume is peak 1912 wealth, and the script, well, the next scene's going to be divine. You've still got a tour of the ship to do, you've got dinner reservations, gossip to overhear, and about 4 more outfits to change into before the sun even thinks about setting. But first, maybe a nap, just a short one, on a bed that cost more than most annual incomes. The knock is soft, like someone tapping a coin on velvet. You call out a mildly enthusiastic "come in," still lounging half sideways on your mile-wide bed, and in steps your steward. He's young, likely not much older than you, with that polished look only Edwardian hospitality can produce. His coat is buttoned to perfection, hair slicked with military precision, and his expression is a masterclass in pleasant neutrality. Just the right mix of "I'm here to serve you" and "I have no opinion about your questionable hat choices." He greets you by name, which is either impressive or deeply unsettling depending on how long you've been here. You get the sense he knows more about your travel habits than some of your friends. As he pulls the curtains slightly to let in more of the late afternoon glow, he asks if you'd like his assistance unpacking. You decline, because pretending to be humble still plays well in 1912, but he gently insists, and just like that the ballet begins. Your wardrobe is no longer a wardrobe, it's now an active volcano of silk, brocade and linen. Shirts are smoothed, dresses are hung with reverence, shoes are lined up like museum artifacts. The steward moves quickly and gracefully, almost like he's dodging invisible tripwires. He pauses occasionally to ask how you'd like your evening gloves stored, or if you prefer your lavender water by the bed or vanity. You start to realise this room isn't just yours, it's curated around you. You don't stay in first class, you exist in it, like a living ornament being gently rotated on a floating display shelf. And every second of your stay is made possible by a behind-the-scenes army of professionals who know their way around monogrammed luggage better than their own birthdays. By the way, here's a delightful detail. Some of the stewards had memorised passengers' names and quirks before the ship even sailed. You liked 3 lumps of sugar in your tea? They knew. You hated being called Madam? They avoided it. One steward, no joke, was known to polish his boots with champagne because a particular passenger refused to be served by anyone with scuffed shoes. That's not service, that's borderline witchcraft. You ask your steward about the dinner schedule, because even though you already skimmed the times posted in the corridor, it's nice to be reassured that yes, food will appear soon and no, you won't be expected to hunt it. He informs you that there's a dinner seating at 700 sharp and that your table has been arranged in the a la carte restaurant, not the main dining saloon. That's a sign you're really someone, or at least pretending to be. The a la carte restaurant is where the glitterati go to pretend they're in Paris instead of bobbing gently toward Newfoundland. He also informs you that if you require assistance dressing for dinner, he'll be available. You thank him, slightly bewildered at the idea that someone else might help put on your socks, and then he's gone again, the door whispering shut behind him like a secret. Left alone, you decide to investigate further. The suite is nice, opulently, absurdly nice, but what really boggles the mind is how many people it takes to keep it that way. First-class stewards worked long shifts, often 16 hours or more, and they weren't just carrying trays. They memorised dietary preferences, drew baths, helped elderly passengers navigate the ship, and knew when to disappear so the illusion of private luxury remained intact. And it wasn't just stewards. Maids for the ladies, valets for the gentlemen, bellboys for the luggage, and waiters who had to recall the difference between 4 kinds of consomme without blinking. There was even a team of Turkish bath attendants for when you just had to be steamed like a dumpling in style. Let's sprinkle in a fringe fact now. One first-class steward later claimed to have received a tip equivalent to 2 months' salary just for running a pair of gloves back to a passenger who left them in the smoking room. That's the kind of wealth we're dealing with here. Gratitude with zero perspective. But here's the scholarly wrinkle. Were the staff truly invisible, or did passengers enjoy the status of being seen with their personal attendants? Some historians argue that the entire first-class experience was performative, like walking through a play where the cast is paid to orbit you. Others claim discretion was everything, and the ideal servant was one you never remembered seeing. In reality, it probably varied. Some guests demanded constant attention. Others preferred to pretend their shoes polished themselves out of sheer loyalty. You step back into the sitting room and glance at the fireplace. It hums gently, its imitation flames flickering with gas-powered precision. It's not hot, just warm enough to feel expensive. You collapse gently into one of the armchairs, its velvet cushion sighing beneath you like it too. Is tired of pretending this level of comfort is normal. From your window, the ocean stretches out in a glassy expanse as if the world forgot to stir the sky today. A few gulls wheel lazily in the distance, but otherwise, it's just you, your suite, and a sea so calm it's eerie. You try to imagine what it must have been like to be a crew member, hustling through narrow hallways below, dodging champagne requests while trying not to get elbowed by another waiter mid-lunge. Meanwhile, here you are, wondering if your silk robe is too afternoon for dinner prep. And then you realise that's the magic trick. The Titanic's first class wasn't designed to transport people, it was designed to cocoon them, to insulate them from noise, labour, effort, even boredom, to make you forget that there was a below deck, that somewhere someone was stoking coal by hand while you tried to decide between pearls and diamonds for a 10-course meal. You glance toward the wardrobe, time to get ready soon. But for now, you allow yourself a few more minutes in this chair, surrounded by hand-carved ceiling mouldings and soft gold light. You can hear footsteps in the corridor, soft, rhythmic servant footsteps, and maybe a laugh from the stateroom next door. Someone's already uncorked something. You're on the most luxurious ship in the world. You've got 5 different gloves and no responsibilities, and somewhere outside your door is a whole cast of people whose entire job is to make sure you never notice how hard they're working. Enjoy it while it lasts. It's a strange thing, watching someone else carry your life in neatly packed boxes. Trunks, really, stacked 2, sometimes 3 high, buckled and latched in glinting brass. Some still smell faintly of cigar smoke and cologne, others of lavender sachets tucked between layers of lace. You're standing near the corridor, outside your suite, as yet another steward wheels past with someone's luggage stacked like a totem of privilege. A small dog pokes its head out of a wicker basket strapped to the top. It's wearing a bow. Of course it is. Your own luggage came aboard earlier, but now, with the bustle of the voyage properly underway, you're starting to notice the sheer scale of the personal cargo first-class passengers brought with them. And you're not talking about oops, forgot my spare umbrella kind of packing. You're talking about people shipping their entire identities across the Atlantic, one velvet-lined trunk at a time. You stroll leisurely toward the companionway staircase, hand grazing the polished rail as you descend into the lower corridor of B-deck, where a row of massive luggage crates lines the wall, temporarily staged for porters to deliver. You pause near a monogrammed steamer trunk the size of a garden shed. A steward nearby notices your curiosity and smiles. "Belongs to a lady from Boston," he says quietly. "3 more just like it. Hats, mostly. Of course, hats. In 1912, if you weren't bringing at least 30 hats for a 5-day voyage, were you even trying?" It's worth pausing here to appreciate the art form that was first-class luggage. Every trunk had a purpose. There were wardrobe trunks that opened like miniature closets, complete with hangers and drawers. Hat trunks with rounded compartments for every brim style. Even specialty cases designed to hold nothing but shoes, each pair resting in its own velvet pouch, like little foot-shaped treasures. And naturally, the luggage was expensive enough to trigger mild vertigo. Louis Vuitton, Gaillard, Asprey, names that whispered, "My luggage is better travelled than your ancestors." Now here's a fringy little nugget of trivia. Among the passengers was a woman named Mrs. Charlotte Collier, who wasn't first class, but when she saw the sheer amount of trunks being hauled aboard for the upper crust, she reportedly whispered to her daughter, "It's like a travelling department store." Not wrong. Some first-class passengers shipped entire tea sets. One had an upright piano packed in pieces. Someone else, likely Benjamin Guggenheim, brought a wine collection that needed its own steward. Let's get specific. In the hold beneath your velvet-slippered feet lies an astounding range of excess. There's a Renault automobile, brought along by William Carter of Philadelphia, snugly stored in a wooden crate like the world's most overqualified paperweight. It even makes a cameo in a certain 1997 movie scene involving a steamy handprint. But let's stay on topic. The car, the luggage, the endless matching sets, these aren't just about utility, they're statements. The aristocratic equivalent of saying, "I vacation harder than you work." And here's where the historians begin to bicker. Some argue that first-class passengers were simply following the customs of transatlantic travel, when one dressed for dinner 3 times and switched clothes for a promenade stroll. What choice did you have but to bring a shipping container of options? Others suggest it was all part of the performance. After all, this wasn't just a voyage, it was a floating fashion show. With society reporters and amateur novelists peeking over their menus in the dining saloon, nobody wanted to be seen repeating a shawl. Back in your suite, you finally dig into your own baggage. Your steward has laid out your evening clothes, but curiosity gets the better of you. One of your trunks is a perfect time capsule. Inside, a pair of lace-up boots with carved wooden heels, a parasol with a silver handle shaped like a bird's claw, and a blue-beaded evening gown that catches the light in a way that screams, "Notice me." Tucked into the corner is a little clutch purse. Inside the purse, a folding mirror, a few shillings, a powder compact, and, because this is 1912, a tiny bottle of smelling salts. Just in case the sight of someone's plunging neckline overwhelms you at dinner. The items are exquisite, but also telling. Every piece is functional and theatrical at once. You're not just dressing for dinner, you're staging a character, a role in this moving aristocratic opera. And every trunk you brought is part of the set dressing. Out in the corridor again, you pass a porter struggling with a particularly large piece. You hear a muttered curse and then a thud as a handle slips from his grip. A nearby steward glances nervously toward your direction. He straightens his uniform and offers a smile, as if nothing happened. That's the rule. The passengers don't see the mess. They just see magic. You take a moment to peek into the first-class baggage room, cavernous space nestled deep in the belly of the ship. It's orderly in that chaotic, looming sort of way. Trunks stacked 6 high, each tagged and categorized. Some have elegant calligraphy. Others are scrawled with initials. In one corner you swear you see a cage. A very fancy cage. A steward confirms it. That's Sir Cosmo's bird. And that's it. No elaboration. No follow-up. Just Sir Cosmo's bird. And speaking of animals, there are dogs aboard. Fancy ones. Lapdogs, hunting breeds, a few with better pedigrees than their owners. The Titanic had an actual dog-walking schedule. Some even had their own life belts, though whether that was for actual rescue or just upper-class theatre is, well, unclear. Here's the odd historical debate. Were all these luxury items really necessary, or was it just fashion-induced panic? Some researchers suggest first-class passengers overpacked because no one wanted to risk being underdressed in front of Astor or Molly Brown. Others claim it was more about psychological comfort. If you're rich and sailing off into an unpredictable ocean, maybe it helps to have your favourite quilt or 10 jars of your favourite jam nearby, just in case. Back up on B-deck, the sun is beginning its descent. The long, narrow hallway glows with golden light. shadows stretching behind every doorknob and wall sconce. You step quietly, hearing only the distant thrum of the engines and the occasional murmur from an open suite door. Another trunk rolls by on a dolly, this one lacquered in deep green with a label reading New York, urgent. You pause, hand on the banister, and look back toward your suite. Somewhere in there, your evening shoes are waiting, polished and perfect, aligned next to a gown so unnecessarily intricate it may require a support team. But before you return, you take one more look down the corridor. Behind every closed door is a curated world, and behind every trunk is a lifetime of effort spent trying to be exactly this rich, this admired, this immaculately packed. Welcome to Titanic First Class. You don't just bring your luggage, you bring your legend. By now, you've realised dinner on the Titanic isn't just a meal, it's a social battlefield camouflaged in white linen and lobster tails. It's not about hunger. No one here is actually hungry. It's about positioning, where you sit, who you sit near, and whether you're close enough to a Rockefeller or Rothschild to catch the scent of their cologne. As your steward gently reminds you that dinner service begins promptly at 7 at the a la carte restaurant, you start to mentally prepare, not for eating, but for manoeuvring. You open your wardrobe and stare at the glittering fabric options. It's not a what should I wear moment, it's more of a who do I want to be tonight vibe. Sophisticated widow, mysterious European countess, American railroad fortune with just a hint of scandal. You go with the gown that has the most embroidered nonsense and possibly weighs as much as a small dog, because if your dress doesn't require architectural support, what are we even doing here? Once dressed, you admire yourself in the tall mirror. The lighting in the suite is warm, golden, and specifically engineered to flatter complexions that may not have seen sunlight since the last polo season. A final touch of perfume at your wrists, a quick brush through your hair, and a passing thought about how no one ever talks about how itchy corsets are. Then it's off to dinner. You take the long way, naturally. You want to be seen before you're seated. The corridor is lined with other first-class passengers doing the same slow-motion parade, every collar starched to maximum rigidity, every hemline flirting with the idea of indecency, but never crossing it. A few of the men nod politely as you pass, eyes flicking down to note the designer of your gown. Or maybe they're just wondering if you've outdone their wives. You probably have. As you step into the a la carte restaurant on B deck, it's clear that this is the crown jewel of the ship. Forget the grand staircase, forget the gym with the mechanical horse. This is the room where reputations are cemented in crystal and cutlery. You inhale, and the air itself smells rich, like truffles, champagne, and ambition. Sunlight still filters in through the tall windows, casting soft halos over the tables, each one dressed with the ironed napkins, folded like origami swans, and glassware so thin it might cry if you clinked it too hard. A maitre d' greets you with a bow, checks a list, and leads you to your table. This is where it gets strategic. There are unspoken rules here. Rules no one explains, but everyone obeys. The closer you are to the centre of the room, the more important you are. Back by the wall? Sorry, you're still rich, but you're either new money or not interesting enough to gossip about. But tonight, you're mid-room. Solid positioning. Near enough to hear the jokes from the millionaires, far enough to ignore the snubs of the petty heiresses. It's perfect. Your dining companions are a carefully curated mix. A Boston banker who's already asked if you summer anywhere decent, an English widow with a diamond choker that could moonlight as body armour, and a young gentleman who looks like he inherited a coal empire but still bites his nails. Conversation begins in polite low tones, about weather, shipping times, horses. You make a clever remark about the stiffness of the napkins, and the banker chuckles. You're in. Now let's address the dining choreography. A steward appears at your elbow the moment you even think about being thirsty. Another hovers with a tray of wine, ready to top you off between bites. The silverware situation is ridiculous. You could perform minor surgery with the number of forks available. And God help you if you grab the wrong one, but don't worry, watch what the widow does. She's done this since the Boer War. Your appetizer arrives. Oysters on the half shell arranged like precious jewels atop crushed ice. They are followed by consommé Olga, a clear soup so delicate you swear it could double as perfume. Then there's poached salmon, filet mignon, lamb with mint sauce, and something called pâté de foie gras, which tastes like silk if silk were aggressively French. Everything is exquisite. Every course appears with perfect timing, accompanied by wine that's been aged since the Crimean War, probably. And here's your quirky detail of the night. The wine steward on the Titanic had an actual key to a private cellar on board. Not metaphorical. A real, jingling, heavy key that unlocked literal liquid wealth. Some of the champagne served on this voyage would now sell for thousands per bottle, assuming it wasn't still aging at the bottom of the Atlantic. As you sip your third glass, conversation shifts to something juicier. Who's not invited to the captain's table? A scandal, it seems. A socialite whose name rhymes with Ivy made a scene at boarding and has since been diplomatically repositioned to the far end of the saloon. You nod solemnly, pretending you don't find it deeply amusing. The banker whispers something about old money versus department store money, and the widow rolls her eyes. Not everyone with a fur stole deserves a dinner bell, she mutters. It's during the game course, roast squab if you're keeping track, that you start to notice just how synchronised this dining experience is. Stewards move like chess pieces, never colliding, never spilling, always knowing exactly who's next. Plates disappear and reappear as if by magic. The only jarring sound is the occasional laughter from a table too drunk to remember their own last names. Now for the scholarly debate moment. Was the a la carte restaurant really more elite than the first-class dining saloon? Some argue yes, it was a pay extra privilege, and not everyone could get a table. Others insist it was less about status and more about privacy. Either way, it wasn't included in the ticket price. If you were eating here, it meant you were extra. The kind of person who didn't just order dinner. You curated an experience. The final course arrives. Waldorf pudding, a touch of mint ice cream, and something suspiciously nougat-like that sticks to your molars. You're full. Not just in the I can't eat another bite sense, but in the I've been fed, flattered, and socially fortified for another day kind of way. Your steward appears with coffee and a chocolate, and then, because he knows everything, asks if you'd like to return to your suite or perhaps visit the smoking room. You glance around the table. The widow's halfway through her brandy, the banker is lighting a cigar. The young coal air has vanished. You rise with grace, offer a gentle smile, and glide out of the restaurant like you own it. Because tonight, in this sea of starched napkins and whispered rivalries, you absolutely do. You barely make it 5 steps from the a la carte restaurant before realising your stomach may have staged a quiet rebellion. It's not pain exactly, more like a velvet-lined fullness. The kind only possible after 12 courses and an ego massage from a wine steward who bowed so often you feared for his neck. Still you pause by the corridor window, one hand lightly touching the pane. The sky outside is fading into a deep Atlantic blue. The kind of colour that makes you wonder if the ocean feels smug about being so consistently dramatic. You exhale and glance back down the corridor. Other first-class passengers are meandering in gentle, satisfied waves, some drifting toward the lounges, others off to change into yet another outfit for the evening's social events. No one's in a hurry. That's the point of being first class. The ship bends to your pace. Now, let's talk about what you just ate, because that wasn't just a dinner. That was a declaration of superiority via protein. The Titanic's first-class menu was a culinary flex so bold it's surprising it didn't come with a tiny edible crown. The full experience involved multiple menus, each tailored to different rooms, different levels of social ambition, and of course different depths of your wallet. Tonight's extravaganza featured oysters, consommé, poached salmon with mousseline sauce, filet mignon, lily with truffle shavings, duck in port wine, roast squab, asparagus salad, and at least 3 desserts that defied logic, gravity, and moderation. Everything was plated with obsessive care. Your asparagus was lined up so precisely you considered taking a photo, if only cameras didn't require 10 minutes, a tripod, and someone named Alfred. And every course came with a wine pairing. The sommelier, or wine steward if we're staying period accurate, circulated like a priest of fermented grapes. One moment he's offering a 1900 Chateau Margaux. The next, he's whispering notes about a Rhine wine that's so delicate it might spontaneously combust if paired with the wrong fish. You nodded sagely, of course, pretending to detect subtle hints of gooseberry and late-stage aristocracy. Here's a fringe fact to uncork. The Titanic carried over 1,500 bottles of wine, 8,000 cigars and hundreds of cases of liquor. all stored in its cellars deep in the ship's hold. And those cellars? They were chilled, with actual refrigeration. That's how serious this voyage was about drinking well. The only thing colder than the champagne was the shade being thrown at the captain's table about someone's new money manners. So who designed this madness? A man named Pierre Rousseau, no relation to the philosopher, but arguably just as influential in shaping the human condition. Pierre ran the a la carte restaurant as if it were a land-based elite club, because technically it was. He wasn't part of White Star Line staff. The restaurant was an independent business, meaning your bill came with a tip line and your steak came with opinions. The wait staff, dressed in stark white jackets, were all French or Belgian because nothing says fine dining like being silently judged in another language. And then there was the food itself, not just well prepared, but over prepared. Nothing could be simple. Chicken? It had to be ballotine with a Madeira glaze. Potatoes? Duchesse style or bust. Soup? Clear as diamonds, garnished with herbs arranged more precisely than your hair. It wasn't just about taste, it was performance on porcelain. Now for the scholarly debate portion of our evening. Some historians argue that the extravagance of first-class dining was part of the illusion of invincibility. If you can eat duck à l'orange mid-Atlantic, nothing can touch you. Others suggest it was a symptom of a fading age, the last gasp of Edwardian splendour before the modern world arrived with its revolutions and bad lighting. The Titanic's menu, they say, was less a meal and more a eulogy. A final toast to the Gilded Age before it sank beneath the weight of its own grandeur. Literally. You shake off the creeping melancholy and turn back toward the main corridor. The hum of conversation from the reception room grows louder as you approach. A string quartet is playing something soft and forgettable, designed more to murmur than impress. You catch snippets of conversation, names dropped like confetti, someone laughing too brightly at a comment about prison tailors, and a woman asking her companion if her pearls look too desperate. You consider slipping into the main first-class dining saloon just to compare vibes, but you already know it won't compare. The saloon, grand as it is, feels like the drawing room of a well-bred aunt. The a la carte restaurant, that was Versailles afloat, and you are very much at court. You pass a steward wheeling a tea trolley. He nods and offers a quiet, "Evening, madame." The cart is topped with petit four and what appears to be a half-melted sugar swan. You file that away for later. Emergency dessert is always a good backup plan. At this point, you could retreat to your suite, change again, lounge with a book you've been pretending to read, but the ship's energy has shifted. The dinner crowd is blooming into the evening set. The smoking room, the lounge, the reading and writing room, they're all pulsing with light conversation, faint perfume, and the clink of ice and crystal. You decide instead to stroll toward the Café Parisien. Just a peek. Not for food, your stomach still negotiating terms of surrender, but to see who else is lingering there. Word is the younger, chattier first-class set has taken it over entirely. A modern little corner of the ship, with rattan chairs and French café tables and soft lighting designed to flatter the young and reckless. But as you walk, you can't help replaying dinner in your mind. Not the food, but the atmosphere. The sense that each course was more than nourishment. It was a shared performance. Every guest an actor, every waiter a choreographer, and you played your part with style. Because on Titanic, first-class dining isn't about feeding the body, it's about feeding the fantasy. And yours, tonight, was perfectly plated. You step lightly down the corridor, the carpet soft beneath your shoes, muffling your every move like you're being quietly ushered into something a bit more exclusive than even dinner was. Ahead, the glow of the Café Parisien spills into the passage like a candle-lit secret. It's easy to forget you're in the middle of the Atlantic when you cross the threshold. This place doesn't feel like a ship. It feels like a trendy Parisian corner bistro that just happens to be lightly swaying with the tide. The room is warm, but not in a stifling way. The kind of warm that makes you loosen your shoulders and tilt your head at just the right angle to seem casual and vaguely superior. Wicker chairs, crisp white tablecloths, potted palms, and tall windows open to the starless night just beyond the glass. The Atlantic looms, quiet and endless. But in here, it's just scenery, like a very expensive oil painting that occasionally splashes. This is where the fashionable younger set comes to flirt with boundaries and sugar content. It's less formal than the main saloon, and much less intimidating than the a la carte's aristocratic maze of table politics. The Café Parisien is the social buffer zone. You could order a snack here and not start a rumour. You could laugh too loudly and no one would scold you. A miracle, really. You slide into a chair near the back, close enough to eavesdrop, far enough to stay mysterious. The waiter appears as if summoned by posture alone. Would Madame care for coffee or perhaps a digestif? You order coffee because you need something to keep your eyes open through all the rich people talking, and he nods and vanishes like a caffeinated ghost. Around you, the conversation hums. Someone's recounting a story about a racehorse. A pair of well-dressed sisters are giggling over a letter they just received. One woman, draped in a light shawl with embroidery that probably cost more than your suite, is quietly arguing with a man in a bowler hat about whether the Riviera is becoming too accessible. You sip your coffee and make no attempt to hide your smirk, and here's a little-known but delightful detail. The Café Parisien was a brand new concept for ships like the Titanic. On previous liners, the atmosphere had always leaned more toward gentleman's club with ocean-induced nausea. But this cafe, it was a fresh experiment, something designed specifically to cater to the young, fashionable American elite who wanted European charm with none of the actual Europeans. The walls are panelled in white-painted wood, delicate fretwork arches stretching above your head like garden trellises. Ivy winds through some of them, not real but convincing enough to make you feel like you're sipping coffee in an April courtyard. There's even the soft scent of flowers in the air, though you're fairly certain it's just perfume from the lady 3 tables over whose every move screams, "My family owns at least one railroad." The menu here isn't formal. It's refreshing. Cold chicken, salmon mayonnaise, fruit, pastries. You order a small plate of strawberries dipped in cream, because, frankly, you're still full from dinner but not quite ready to stop being decadent. When they arrive, they're perfect. Ruby red and so fragrant they might as well have been grown by angels on break. Let's pause for a moment and zoom in on the quirky side of things. One of the cafe's chefs was known to create elaborate sugar sculptures on request. Not always for display. Sometimes just because a guest thought it would be fun to see a marzipan model of their dog. One afternoon he made a 5-tiered tower shaped like the Eiffel Tower, not because it was on the menu, just because someone wanted it. Wealth, it turns out, is having the power to demand dessert be geographically themed. The cafe, like everything on the Titanic, had a hidden cost. It wasn't part of your first-class ticket. You paid extra here, both in coin and in subtle social currency. Ordering something here said, "I'm not like the older crowd, I do casual luxury." A plate of fruit here meant more than a course of quail in the main dining room. It meant relevance, ease, cool, and of course historians love to argue about whether the Café Parisien was a sign of class softening or class ossifying. Some suggest it was where old money went to pretend they were young money. Others say it was a test space, a prototype for a new kind of shipboard life that would eventually lead to the full-blown cruise culture we know today. Less empire, more espresso. You're midway through your strawberries when someone you recognise enters. A gentleman from earlier. He'd been seated 2 tables away during dinner. The one with the tailored grey evening coat and the face that suggested he might own too many horses. He spots you, offers a subtle nod, and chooses a table just across the room. Not next to you, of course. That would be too direct. This is first class. Interest is implied, not announced. You offer a faint smile, then casually look away. Somewhere nearby, the soft clatter of teacups blends with quiet laughter. Another couple enters. A steward holds the door for them and bows as they pass, as if entering the cafe is akin to stepping onto a stage. Maybe it is. And here's something worth noting. In the ship's design, this cafe shared a wall with the veranda cafe, another semi-open space designed to imitate sunny garden life. The idea was to create the illusion of land while floating far from it. Passengers could pretend they were at the Ritz in Paris, not hovering above miles of freezing black water. It was all theatre. Beautiful, delicious theatre. You finish your coffee slowly, letting the buzz settle behind your eyes. Outside, the sea has gone full obsidian, reflecting nothing, swallowing everything. But in here, the cafe glows like a pearl. Time stretches. You don't feel the motion of the ship. You don't hear the engines. You're surrounded by warmth, conversation, the soft chime of cutlery. Nothing bad has ever happened in this room. Nothing could happen. You dab your lips with a napkin, nod at the waiter and rise gracefully. There's still time to explore more of the ship tonight, but already you can feel the Café Parisien anchoring itself in your memory. This room, this strange little corner of calm and cake, might be the most deceptively perfect part of the Titanic. It wasn't the most famous. It wasn't even on the posters, but in the end, this was the heart of the voyage. where the fantasy felt so soft, so safe you forgot to look for lifeboats. The corridor cools slightly as you leave the warm embrace of the Café Parisien behind, and your shoes tap lightly against the floor, more confident now, more in tune with the rhythm of the ship. You pass a pair of gentlemen murmuring over a folded schedule, one pointing excitedly at a location on D-deck as if he's just discovered treasure. You keep going. You're not looking for dinner anymore, or coffee, or even company. You're looking for the stuff. The wild, whimsical, completely unnecessary first-class amenities that were baked into this ship like jewels inside a chocolate cake. You step through a polished doorway and immediately feel the air shift. There's something almost theatrical about it, like you've just passed into the part of the ship where fun is curated, calibrated, and served with a straight face. Welcome to Titanic's idea of exercise. Yes, it exists, and no, you're not hallucinating. You're inside a gym, on a ship, in 1912. It's smaller than you expected, more boutique than arena, but it's packed with equipment so strange and elaborate it looks like someone tried to assemble a jungle gym while half asleep. There's a mechanical rowing machine, a pair of electric camels, you heard that right, a bicycle contraption, a set of pulleys and ropes for muscle stretching, and a squat, horse-shaped device that turns out to be a mechanical horse for posture training. You'd laugh if everyone else in here did not look so serious about it. A steward nods at you as you enter, asking softly if you would like to try the rowing machine. You decline, not because you're unfit, though dinner and dessert are still aggressively hanging out in your midsection, but because this place feels more like a performance than a workout. The men here are in tailored exercise suits, not sweating so much as glistening. The women, who are allowed in at specific times only, appear in long skirts, prim blouses, and expressions that suggest they'd rather die than be seen grunting. Here's your historical fact for the day. The gymnasium on Titanic was a genuine marvel. It was designed by Thomas Macaulay, the ship's physical educator, who offered private training sessions and even fitness evaluations. That's right. Before your brunch of pheasant and profiteroles, you could get an assessment of your physical efficiency and receive a tailored workout plan. Because nothing pairs with foie gras like a gentle suggestion to tighten your core. You hover near the electric camel, watching a man bounce slightly as the machine jerks forward in mechanical, awkward lunges. The thing is loud and vaguely absurd, and yet everyone is acting like it's the height of technology. And in 1912, it kind of is. The ship boasts modern electricity, a Marconi wireless room, and enough luxury to distract from the fact that most people still use horses for errands. So if someone tells you you can ride a fake camel in the middle of the ocean, you don't ask questions, you book a session. Eventually you move on. The gym is amusing, but it smells faintly of leather straps and masculine competition. You crave something softer. The Turkish bath, perhaps? You descend to F-deck. And as you approach, the air shifts again, this time humid, perfumed, and just the tiniest bit intoxicating. The Turkish bath complex is nestled down here like a decadent secret, and stepping into it feels like time travel. Warm mosaics, dark woods, tiled walls, and low lighting create an atmosphere that whispers luxury in slow, sultry syllables. The bath attendants greet you politely, and you're led through a series of chambers, each more indulgent than the last. The cooling room, with its plush lounges and citrus-scented air. The hot room, glowing faintly with heat and thick with steam. You run your fingers along the tiled wall, which is warm to the touch, and let the moisture settle into your skin like 1,000 tiny blessings. And here's your fringe detail of the evening. The Turkish bath had separate times for men and women, of course, but during one of the more scandalous rumours that never made it to formal record, a gentleman was once caught trying to bribe an attendant for access during the ladies' hour. The only thing more shocking than his nerve? The fact that he offered him a watch instead of money. Priorities. You sink briefly into a lounge chair in the cooling room, the fabric soft beneath your fingertips, your eyes half closed as the warmth seeps into your bones. It's the kind of comfort that makes you wonder if you're still on a ship. In fact, it's the kind of comfort that makes you wonder if you ever want to leave this ship. A soft bell rings in the distance, perhaps a reminder that another hour has passed. Or perhaps it's just one more layer of pageantry. Everything on the Titanic is wrapped in ceremony. Time isn't just measured, it's announced. And now we approach the scholarly debate for tonight's tour. Did first-class passengers actually use these amenities regularly, or were they mostly for show? Some accounts suggest the gym was rarely full, the squash court nearly always empty, and the Turkish bath mostly favoured by a handful of socialites and curious millionaires. Others argue that these features were a vital part of the first-class experience, a way for passengers to prove they weren't just rich, but well-rounded, health-conscious, and vaguely European in their tastes. You rise, refreshed and slightly flushed, and take one last look around the bath. The mosaic ceiling above you gleams with tiny blue tiles arranged into stars. Another gleam, maybe, but a beautiful one. You exit through the dressing room, a young attendant handing you a small glass of iced lemonade without being asked. You thank him softly and head back toward the stairs, sipping as you climb. The hallway is cool again, the ocean once more pressed invisibly against the walls. It's easy to forget where you are down here, tucked in velvet lounges, pretending your muscles are tense from something other than reclining too hard. But you're reminded of it as you pass a small window and glimpse the night sea beyond. It's black and endless. It doesn't care about electric camels or steam baths. But up here, we pretend. Because pretending is what first class does best. You emerge from the Turkish bath like royalty returning from exile, skin warmed, muscles loose, and just a little smug about how luxurious sweating can be when it costs extra. The corridor feels cooler now, the ship quieter in this liminal hour between dinner and the descent into truly scandalous conversation. Your steps carry you back toward the more social parts of the ship, where the real games are played, not with cards but with glances and whispered names. The smoking room is calling. Now, technically, you're not supposed to go in unless you're male or bold enough to pretend the rules are just suggestion. But let's be honest, the walls of propriety aboard Titanic are lined with loopholes, and women with names like Astor or Duff Gordon don't exactly wait for permission. Tonight, you decide to observe first, then judge accordingly. The smoking room is tucked neatly off the grand staircase, a self-contained little kingdom of dark woods, leather armchairs and deep inhalations. It smells exactly as you imagined. Cigars, brandy and the quiet arrogance of inherited wealth. Men occupy nearly every seat, some reading newspapers, others hunched over card tables, glasses in hand. No one is loud. This is not the loud room. This is the room where being quiet is a power move. You step just inside the doorway, and a steward nods. Not welcoming exactly, but not blocking your path either. That's as close to consent as you'll get. You lean lightly against a carved oak column, pretending to admire the intricate woodwork while, in truth, you're tuning into the conversations like a hawk in a hat. At a table near the fireplace, two older gentlemen are discussing coal futures. Their voices are low but firm, each speaking with the slow, deliberate cadence of men who are used to having their words weighed, not challenged. One of them is smoking a cigar so large it might qualify as its own passenger. He flicks the ash into a tray shaped like a lion's head, muttering something about continental instability and London liquidity. A few seats away, a much younger man, early 20s, dark hair, parted with such precision it's practically a ruler, is laughing softly, with a companion about the fashions at lunch. Mrs. Cardaza's ostrich feathers nearly caught fire near the buffet, he says, and the other man snorts, nearly spilling his sherry. You can't help but smirk. Feather-related near-death experiences feel very on-brand for this voyage. Let's interrupt with a quirky footnote. The Titanic smoking room wasn't just for puffing cigars and muttering about markets. There was a full bar, a selection of newspapers from both sides of the Atlantic, and most notably an in-house bookmaker. That's right, passengers could place bets on everything from how fast the ship was moving to when it would arrive. One particular bet revolved around whether the Titanic would break the record for fastest Atlantic crossing, despite the White Star Line officially claiming speed wasn't the goal. Spoiler alert, they didn't win that bet. But that's a few nights from now. You ease deeper into the room, finally taking a seat near the window. Outside, the sea is ink dark, occasionally catching flashes of light from the interior. It's strange, being surrounded by such masculine bravado and yet feeling entirely outside of it. Like watching a game without knowing the rules, but still instinctively understanding who's winning. Now here's where historians get into their scholarly kerfuffles. Some argue that the smoking room was the true centre of first-class power on the Titanic. Not the dining saloon, not the bridge, but here, where men talked business over brandy and made deals that would echo across oceans. Others insist it was more of a vanity chamber, a retreat where aristocrats pretended to manage empires while actually avoiding their wives and children. The truth, as usual, is probably somewhere in between. Both deal-making and delusion happened here, often at the same table. A steward approaches, offering you a drink, and you request a small brandy. It arrives quickly, served in glassware so delicate you feel guilty holding it with just one hand. The amber liquid is warm and smooth, and you lean back, allowing the atmosphere to settle over you like cigar smoke. Rich, heady, and vaguely ridiculous. The man nearest you turns and nods. He introduces himself in the clipped manner of someone whose family name does all the heavy lifting. You respond politely, not revealing much, mystery being currency in rooms like this. He offers a wry observation about the number of cigar brands available, noting that a gentleman could waste half the voyage deciding which tobacco pairs best with ennui. You laugh politely and make a comment about how very few ships offer the luxury of existential boredom. It goes over well. You spend the next half hour observing the rotation. Men come and go, some with fresh newspapers, others looking slightly too red-faced from the Turkish bath. One particularly portly gentleman is asleep in his chair, snoring with the gentle wheeze of a fireplace bellows. No one disturbs him. In first class, even unconsciousness is dignified. Let's bring in another delightful fact. The card games in the smoking room weren't just friendly distractions, some were full-blown high-stakes battles. There are reports of poker hands reaching what today would be tens of thousands of dollars. A single evening could change a man's mood, or his net worth, and the best part, these games were never officially recorded. The smoking room was a sanctuary of untraceable wagers. Eventually you rise, nodding politely to your neighbours and returning your glass to the waiting tray. The room has grown denser with smoke and the subtle heat of too many egos in wool. As you step out into the fresher corridor air, the difference is immediate. You can breathe again, and think, and remember that not all of the ship is wrapped in mahogany and bravado. Still, there's something to admire about the smoking room. Not the decor, not the drinks, but the sheer audacity of it. A room built entirely for men to pretend they were still running the world, even as the world quietly shifted beneath them. You walk on, the night deepening around you, footsteps slow and steady. There are other rooms to discover, other masks to wear, but for now you carry the scent of cigar smoke with you like a souvenir from a world that never imagined it could end. You wake up the next morning not so much from sleep as from saturation. It's as if your dreams were just a looping slideshow of velvet chairs, oysters, and polite nods from people who don't remember your name but definitely remember your jewellery. The sheets are cool, the room dim, and the Atlantic hums quietly against the hull like a distant drum roll that never ends. You stretch beneath the heavy covers, vaguely aware of your own absurd privilege. You've done nothing, and yet you're exhausted in the most elegant way imaginable. There's a gentle knock at the door. Not frantic, not hurried, just the soft percussion of someone whose job is to make mornings feel like offerings. Your steward enters with practiced silence, carrying a silver tray that gleams despite the low light. On it, fresh tea, 2 slices of lightly buttered toast, and a dainty bowl of fruit arranged with the kind of effort usually reserved for wedding tables and national celebrations. You mumble something that passes for thank you, and he responds with a small nod before disappearing again, like a well-mannered phantom. You sip your tea slowly, the heat soothing your throat, the china cup clicking gently against the saucer. This is how the day begins in first class, not with an alarm or a rooster, or even a whisper of urgency. It begins with ceremony. Eventually you rise and make your way to the vanity. You catch your reflection in the mirror and squint. The face staring back at you is the same, but somehow softer, slightly more luminous, as if the ship itself is slowly polishing you into a more expensive version of yourself. You dab on a bit of rosewater, brush through your hair, and pull on a silk morning robe, because even laziness must be well dressed up here. And now the transformation begins. It's morning, which means it's time to prepare for lunch. But before that comes the ritual of dressing, not getting dressed, dressing. This is a full contact sport in first class, involving multiple layers, assistance from your maid, if you brought one, and garments with names like Gimp and Modesty Panel. You open your wardrobe, now neatly organised by your steward, and pull out a dress appropriate for the late morning. Not too fussy, heaven forbid you outshine someone at noon, but still ornate enough to send a message. Yes, I woke up looking like this, but also my sleeves cost more than your week's wages. Today's gown is a dusty lilac confection with fine lace at the collar and delicate beadwork at the cuffs. You pair it with white gloves, a pearl choker and a wide-brimmed hat that threatens to knock over lamps if you turn too quickly. The process takes half an hour, not counting the internal pep talk required to stuff yourself into a corset without making sounds usually reserved for emergency dental work. Let's pause for a second to appreciate the reality of first-class fashion on the Titanic. These weren't just clothes, they were announcements. Each gown, each gobtriade, each gloved hand fluttering over a soup spoon told a story about your wealth, your taste, your marital status, your social standing, and whether or not you'd ever been snubbed by a duchess. Edwardian fashion was war, and you're dressed to win. Now for a historical fact to button all this up. The Titanic had a first-class dressmaker's room. If your hem ripped, your lace tore, or your cuffs needed emergency reinforcement, you didn't panic, you sent for the dressmaker. This was a ship where you could have alterations done while at sea. Let that sink in, pun slightly intended. But even the best-dressed passengers needed help sometimes. A common whispered complaint among the first-class women, the iron-on embellishments tended to come loose in the humidity. More than one bejeweled guest found herself shedding sequins across the reception room floor like a fashion-forward breadcrumb trail. As one passenger reportedly muttered, "By the time I reach New York, I'll be half naked and entirely rhinestoned." Now for a bit of fringe fun. One first-class passenger, a woman named Edith Rosenbaum, brought with her a musical pig. Yes, you read that correctly, a musical pig. It was a little porcelain toy that played a tune when wound up, supposedly a good luck charm. She dressed it, she bathed it, she even took it to lunch, and weirdly, she wasn't the only one carrying emotional support porcelain. Another woman had a set of dolls that travelled in a custom-made trunk, each one with its own wardrobe. Wealth doesn't change people, it just makes their hobbies harder to explain. Back in your suite, you're finally ready. You step out into the corridor, and immediately fall into pace with another first-class woman, who nods politely before disappearing down a side hallway, possibly toward the reading and writing room, possibly toward a clandestine meeting with a mustachioed Italian count. Anything is possible aboard this ship. The air smells faintly of lilies and lavender oil. Somewhere nearby, a steward is polishing a doorknob with alarming intensity. Now here's where scholars get twitchy. Were the elaborate outfits and accessories purely a performance, or were they functional parts of the first-class code? One camp argues that fashion aboard the Titanic was essentially armour, an unspoken language of social combat where each seaman brooch carried meaning. Another camp believes the sheer effort of the daily costume parade was exhausting even to those who lived it, and most passengers quietly longed for the freedom of slouching in a robe by the fire. But guess what? The ship didn't allow robes outside your suite. So unless you wanted to scandalise the staff, you laced up your corset and cinched that waist. By the time you reach the reception room, it's late morning and the crowd has shifted. Tea service is winding down. A few early risers are sketching at side tables or trading correspondence like it's contraband. Your gloves are still crisp, your collar unwrinkled, your hat appropriately tilted. You slide into a chair near the grand piano and glance around. You're ready. This isn't just fashion, this is survival. In first class, you don't eat until you dress, you don't speak until you accessorise, and you definitely don't relax, until you've inspected yourself from 4 angles and approved your silhouette. This, you realise, isn't just a ship. It's a runway with lifeboats. The door to the smoking room closes gently behind you, but the scent lingers. Cigars, wood polish, and that unmistakable perfume of masculine ego. You're walking now toward one of the quieter corridors, passing stewards mid-task, nodding passengers who don't quite remember if they've met you, or simply admire your gloves. Your next stop? Somewhere far more exclusive than it lets on. Not for the clamour of conversation or the aroma of lobster and cream sauce, but for the art of retreat, of soft domination. You're headed to the ladies' reading and writing room. Tucked discreetly along the promenade deck, this room doesn't flaunt its power. It doesn't need to. The women who use it, first-class ladies of influence, taste, and sometimes terrifying subtlety, already know what it is. A refuge, a salon, a tactical lounge masquerading as a place to write postcards. You slip inside and immediately feel the hush. It's not silence exactly. It's a cultured quiet, the kind that vibrates with unspoken judgments and genteel secrets. Everything in here is pale and elegant. Soft carpeting, damask-covered chairs, and tall windows that frame the endless Atlantic like a stage set. The lighting is gentle, natural, designed to flatter cheekbones and fine lace. A steward moves silently along the far wall, arranging fresh flowers. He doesn't make eye contact. He knows better. You choose a seat near the window, setting your gloves carefully on a nearby table. There are a few others scattered around the room. A woman in a dove-grey gown is scribbling furiously into a diary, her brow tight with either passion or pure focused pettiness. Another is delicately sipping tea, her hat obscuring half her face as she listens to a conversation behind her that she's definitely not a part of, but absolutely eavesdropping on. It's a game in here. Everyone's pretending to be occupied with paper or poetry or the view. But this is where the real connections are made, quietly without clinking glasses or card shuffles. A compliment on a shawl leads to an introduction. A shared moment watching the waves opens a door to scandalous gossip. This room is where alliances form and dissolve, usually without anyone even raising their voice. And here's your historical fact of the moment. The ladies' reading and writing room was designed specifically to be separate from male-dominated areas like the smoking room or the lounge. It was a nod to propriety, but also to power. First-class women were expected to manage correspondence, host miniature salons, and maintain appearances, and this room allowed them to do so away from the noise and judgment of their husbands, brothers, or male companions of ambiguous marital status. You reach for the writing desk beside you. There's a drawer filled with crisp, white star-lined stationery. The paper is thick, embossed with the emblem of the ship. There's even a small glass inkwell already filled, and a fountain pen resting beside it. You begin a letter, not because you have anything to say, but because everyone else is writing something and it would look strange if you didn't. Dearest Eleanor, you write, even though Eleanor is a completely fabricated friend you invented yesterday. The sea is calm, but the company is choppier. I shall tell you all once I return, assuming I haven't died of excessive feather exposure. You pause. Not bad. Across the room you hear the unmistakable tinkle of gentle laughter. Someone's just delivered a witty line, probably about the new money couple seated near the grand staircase last night. You don't need to hear the words, you know the tone. It's the same one used by women who run empires from their drawing rooms and make it look like embroidery. Let's insert a quirky detail now. Lady Duff Gordon, yes, the fashion designer and social juggernaut, was often seen in this room, using it not just to write letters, but to sketch gown designs, take appointments, and occasionally settle rumours with a single glance. One particularly juicy story suggests she once convinced another passenger to cancel her New York debut simply by implying the colours were out of season. No raised voice, no accusation, just a quietly sharpened smile and a devastating, well, I certainly couldn't wear that in May. You look out the window. The ocean has taken on that strange, undulating steel blue sheen that comes in the late morning, when the sun is high but not quite bold and the ship seems to glide over velvet. You can't see land. You can't hear anything beyond the quiet rustle of paper and the occasional clink of china. This is the part that most people forget about the Titanic, that it wasn't all chandeliers and ballrooms and frantic violin music. So much of first class was quiet, controlled, curated. It was designed not to impress you with drama, but to lull you into forgetting you weren't on land, to make you believe this floating palace was real, permanent, untouchable. And now for the scholarly debate that simmers behind this room's delicate decor. Some historians argue that the ladies' reading and writing room was a patronising nod to Victorian ideals, a powder puff space to keep the women quiet while the men smoked and gambled. Others point out that the room was often more intellectually vibrant than any cigar-scented club on board. Letters written here would shape social narratives back in America. It wasn't just about pretty handwriting, it was influence, sealed with wax. As you finish your imaginary letter to Eleanor, you fold the paper and slip it into one of the envelopes provided. You won't send it, of course, but that's not the point. You came here to participate, to exist within this curated calm, to be seen gently in the soft light of intelligence and quiet defiance. Before you leave, you pass a side table stacked with books and newspapers. You pick one up just to appear occupied. The headlines are stale, a few days old, full of European politics and theatre reviews. But you're not reading for content, you're reading for effect. A woman alone with a book is both powerful and politely unapproachable. You rise, another polite nod to the steward, one to the woman in grey who finally looks up from her diary and offers a tight-lipped smile. Truce? Maybe, maybe not. In this room you never quite know. The door closes behind you with a whisper. Outside the world returns, brighter, louder. But for a moment, you are in the eye of the storm. The most silent, beautiful storm first class ever created. And you walked out with your hat perfectly still. By the time you step out into the corridor again, the mood has shifted. The sunlight streaming through the promenade windows is gentler now, less commanding, slanting at just the right angle to touch the brass rails and polished woodwork with a kind of slow, drowsy grace. You're not in a rush, and neither is anyone else. There's no such thing as urgency in first class, only preference. And right now, your preference leans toward a slow wander and a little light manipulation of social gravity. You follow the corridor around until you reach the grand staircase again. Yes, that staircase, the one with the clock, the glass dome above it, and the sweeping curve that makes everyone feel like they've just descended into their own personal opera. Even when you're not making an entrance, it feels like a stage. You stand at the top for a moment, hand resting on the carved oak banister, watching people move below like watching an aquarium stocked with very elegant, very judgmental fish. It's a good place to observe without being obvious. There's a couple in conversation near the clock, her gloved hand resting lightly on his arm. Another woman in blue stands near the landing, pretending to study the stained glass, but actually scanning the room for someone interesting. No one is moving quickly. It's all pauses and glances, and that slow orbiting motion first-class passengers perfect after day one at sea. You descend slowly, feeling your skirt brush against your ankles, one gloved hand still trailing the banister like you're in a period drama, and the next scene involves a marriage proposal. The staircase is warm beneath your fingers, polished by countless palms, yes, but also by pure intention. It wasn't made to be touched. It was made to be admired while you pretend not to care. Downstairs, the reception room is beginning to swell again with activity. You hear the clink of teacups, the occasional burst of polite laughter, and music, soft, atmospheric, the kind of background score that makes you feel like you should have a secret to whisper. But today you're not here for tea. Today you're headed outside. You follow the hall toward the doors that open onto Promenade C, a covered walkway that stretches nearly the length of the ship, lined with white-painted iron supports and wide enough to host the world's most elegant traffic jam. You step out and the first thing you notice is the air. Brisk, cold. The Atlantic has no interest in your jewellery or titles. It slices through silk and satin like paper, reminding you that out here, you're just another passenger with lungs and a tendency to forget your scarf. Still, the promenade is beautiful. It wraps the deck like a porch on a floating mansion. Wicker chairs are arranged in small clusters, some already occupied by couples sipping cocoa, or ladies holding parasols against a sun that isn't even trying to be warm. The floor is teak, a golden wood that creaks softly underfoot. You take a few slow steps, breathing in the sea air, which smells mostly of salt, coal smoke, and the faintest trace of perfume from someone you passed 3 seconds ago. And now, a curious historical detail. Promenade C was technically a private promenade, available only to certain first-class suites. Specifically, the parlour suites and the millionaires' cabins on B-deck had direct access to this area, which meant you could stumble out of a bed, throw on a fur-trimmed coat and be strolling the Atlantic before your eggs even hit the tray. It was the Edwardian equivalent of having a balcony suite on a cruise ship, except, of course, the balcony was the size of a football field and came with waitstaff. You lean against the rail now, looking out at the sea. It's endless and smooth, dark blue with flashes of silver where the sun hits it. No birds, no boats, just water and wind and the quiet murmur of stewards inside preparing for the next meal you're not even hungry for. A couple walks past you, the man in a grey morning coat and the woman wearing what can only be described as a travelling hat with commitment issues. She glances at you. You exchange those polite, shallow nods that say, "Yes, we see each other, no, we're not friends." That's how it works out here. The promenade isn't just for air, it's for placement. People note who's walking with whom, how often, and whether or not your hat matches your gloves. Don't think they don't notice. They absolutely notice. And here's where the scholars start hissing at each other. Was the promenade a place of genuine relaxation, or just another performative platform to showcase wealth and propriety? Some argue it was the ship's catwalk, a place to be seen, assessed, and filed into the unspoken social hierarchy. Others suggest it offered a rare escape from the constant expectations of indoor life. But either way, you weren't here just out for a walk. You were on display. Always. You find an empty chair tucked behind a partition and sit for a while, watching the ocean peel past like unspooling silk. It's hypnotic. The ship glides so smoothly you hardly feel movement, and yet the water never stops rushing by. Time on this deck stretches, minutes melt, the air numbs your cheeks, but you don't go inside, not yet. This, you realise, might be the only place on the ship where no one is talking. No music, no announcements, no gossip. Just the quiet scrape of footsteps on wood, the occasional rattle of a teacup, and the rhythmic hiss of the ocean breaking beneath you. It's strangely honest, and in a voyage filled with pretense and posture, honesty feels luxurious. Now for something delightfully fringe. There were reports, quiet, barely recorded, of nighttime walks taken on Promenade Sea. Long after dinner, when the ship quieted and the stars came out, certain passengers would slip from their cabins and walk alone or in pairs, wrapped in cloaks or a conversation. Some romances began this way, some rumours too. There were even whispers of a late-night violinist who played under the moonlight, though no official record confirms this. It's one of those stories that lives in the ocean now, true or not. Eventually you rise. The wind has picked up a little, tugging at your sleeves and teasing the hem of your dress. You smooth it down, adjust your hat, and walk slowly back toward the doors. Inside, the warmth will feel a little too warm at first. The ship will smell like pastries again. Someone will offer you tea, but for a moment, out there on Promenade Sea, you remember the sea. You remember that this palace moves, that below the elegance there's engine fire and metal and the indifferent depths. And still, you return inside with perfect posture. Because in first class, even your existential crises are well dressed. The ship settles into Sunday with a kind of sacred hush, not scalinant exactly, but subdued. Even the chandeliers seem to shine more modestly this morning. The hallways smell faintly of fresh linen and lemon oil, and everything feels carefully composed, like the Titanic is staging its own version of reverence. There's no whistle or bell to wake you, just the soft knock of your steward and the quiet clink of a breakfast tray being delivered. Tea, toast, and a tiny ramekin of marmalade. Holy in its own way. You rise slowly, muscles still a little stiff from yesterday's promenade chills. It's the kind of morning that begs for wool and restraint, so you choose a high-neck dress in a conservative shade of grey-blue, trimmed with just enough lace to whisper, "I'm still interesting, but not on the Lord's Day." Gloves, of course, and a hat with a bit of netting, tasteful morning energy minus the grief. The word has already made its way through the first-class grapevine. There will be a Sunday service held in the first-class dining saloon at 10:30. It's not mandatory, naturally. Nothing in first class is, but attendance is expected. Observed. Quietly noted. Not going raises eyebrows. Going but falling asleep during the hymn. Career ending. By the time you reach the saloon, it's already filling up. The long tables have been reconfigured into orderly rows, chairs lined precisely like dominoes that refuse to fall. White starline hymnals rest neatly on each seat, the ship's logo embossed on the cover just to remind you that yes, even worship aboard the Titanic is branded. You take a seat near the centre, not too close to the front, you're not that devout, and not too far back, you're not that indifferent. Around you the congregation settles with rustling programmes and faint coughs. The men are soberly dressed, most in dark jackets, cravats tied with extra precision. The women are a portrait of Edwardian restraint, all lace collars, long sleeves and hats with brims wide enough to obscure their neighbour's view and possibly their sins. And then there's the sound, the organist warming up with slow, deliberate chords, as if tuning the entire saloon into some kind of calm. You glance around. There's Astor again, seated toward the front with his young wife, whispering something that earns him a delicate smile. Lady Duff Gordon is here too, looking deeply unimpressed by the hymn selection. A few stewards hover near the side walls, standing quietly, hands folded, as if waiting for the ship itself to ask for communion. The service begins with a hymn, Eternal Father, strong to save. You sing along, sort of, the melody familiar, but the words floating just out of reach. The harmonies rise gently, filling the room like steam, and for a moment there's a strange unity here. No matter how many titles or diamonds or hired companions one might have, everyone's voices blend into the same refrain. It's a strangely grounding experience. For all the glitter and theatre of first class, this room is quiet, measured. No one is putting on a show here. Even the most flamboyant socialites seem toned down, like the Atlantic has pressed a cool hand to their foreheads and whispered, "Let's all be reasonable for 1 hour." Now here's your historical footnote for this divine occasion. Captain Edward Smith himself leads the Sunday service. It's brief, formal, and exactly what's expected. He reads from the Church of England prayer book and offers a short passage about faith and the sea, something about man's place in the vastness of creation, which suddenly feels less like metaphor and more like a caution sign. Captain Smith, by the way, has an interesting aura about him. Not just because he's a seasoned naval commander with the beard of a Greek philosopher, but because everyone wants to trust him. He's the father figure of the voyage, the steady hand. Passengers refer to him as the millionaire's captain because of how frequently he's requested by the wealthy for their voyages. He's charming, formal, and always precisely as reassuring as a man in charge of your fate should be. And now for your quirky fringe detail. During this Sunday service, it's said that several passengers snuck in late, trying not to clack their heels or ruffle feathers, literally. One woman allegedly attempted to remove her hat mid-service after realising its size was blocking an entire row's view of the pulpit. In the process, she unpinned not only the hat, but a cascade of artificial flowers and a very startled stuffed bird. It took 3 stewards to contain the situation, and yet somehow it never reached the gossip circuit. Proof perhaps that even chaos can be politely ignored when performed in the right company. The service continues with a reading from Psalms and a closing prayer. You bow your head, not just out of devotion, but because everyone else does and you're not looking to be that person. You hear someone sigh quietly behind you, perhaps touched by the words, perhaps already thinking about lunch. Now for the scholarly attention. Was religion aboard the Titanic a genuine part of daily life, or simply another social obligation? Some historians argue the services were deeply meaningful to many passengers, especially given the unpredictable nature of sea travel. Others believe it was more about appearances, a performance of piety, expected and politely tolerated. The truth is likely a mix of both. The service offered comfort, structure, and, crucially, an opportunity to be seen making all the right devout noises at all the right devout times. When it ends, the room slowly dissolves back into its more familiar role. Chairs begin to shift. A few women stop to speak softly with the captain. Some men offer nods to their neighbours before disappearing toward the smoking room. You linger for a moment, watching the final hymnals being collected, the organist softly closing the instrument. It's strange, this blending of reverence and routine. Church on land is a place apart. Church at sea is just another room with better acoustics. As you leave the dining saloon, the ship hums back to life around you. The corridors are bustling again, stewards moving swiftly with silver trays, passengers consulting the day's event schedule, as if they might miss something vital. The spell of the morning service lifts gradually, like fog burning off in sunlight. But something lingers. A little weight, a little awareness. You step into the corridor. Outside, the sky is a perfect pale blue, and the sea is calm enough to look painted. You glance up, feeling the faint vibration of the ship beneath your feet. Not unsettling, just present, reminding you that no matter how thick the carpet or gold-edged the mirror, you are on water. And water does not care how many hymns you sing. The sun has climbed to its polite midday perch, casting crisp shadows along the ship's promenade like a tidy postcard of luxury and motion. After the hush of the Sunday service, everything feels sharper. Voices are brighter, parasols more determined, and the Atlantic sparkles with almost indecent clarity. You've changed, of course. The morning dress, solemn, respectable, is gone, replaced with something more leisurely. A walking ensemble of cream linen and pale green trim, complete with a small straw hat tilted just enough to say, yes, I follow fashion, but I also lead it. You make your way back to the open deck, not Promenade C this time, but the full stretch of the upper first-class promenade. This is where the real Sunday ritual plays out. The post-service constitutional. A stroll not taken for exercise, but for exposure. Not for fresh air, but for reputation management. It's the perfect place to be seen without the vulgarity of trying to be seen. You merely exist in fine clothing, among others doing the same, like flowers casually blooming in a curated garden. The promenade wraps around the ship, wide and open to the sea, with tall white walls on one side and a steel railing on the other. The Atlantic is right there, just over the edge, gleaming, endless, unconcerned. But up here, on this roughly swept teakwood deck, you could almost forget what's underneath you. The sea isn't danger, it's decor. As you walk, you pass couples arm in arm, some engaged in quiet, affectionate conversation, others in silence so pointed it probably has a backstory. A group of elderly gentlemen cluster around a deck chair, sharing commentary that includes phrases like inferior tailoring and untrustworthy vowels, and a young woman with a red ribbon in her hair power walks past in a blur of perfume and barely concealed determination. She's either chasing ambition or someone's younger brother. The stewards are out too, dressed in their finest, moving up and down the promenade with trays of tea, lemonade, and what appear to be miniature fruit tarts that are too small to taste but too beautiful not to accept. You help yourself to a glass of lemonade, just tart enough to remind you of your status, and continue walking. Now here's your historical detail of the day. On ships like the Titanic, promenading was a formalised social practice. It wasn't merely encouraged, it was expected. Ladies and gentlemen were assigned promenade times by class and gender in older ships, though by 1912 the rigid rules had softened. Still, the habit remained. A proper stroll after meals showed grace, health, and the kind of casual elegance that suggested you didn't need to work for anything in your life, including circulation. A steward tips his cap as you pass. You nod, the breeze lifting the edge of your hat as you take in the view. It really is perfect out here. The sea is so calm it looks static like glass. No waves, no spray, just that deep, endless blue. Somewhere ahead you imagine icebergs bobbing invisibly on the horizon, but that's a future thought. A midnight thought. Right now the world is soft and slow and curated. The ship is still the floating jewel it promised to be. Nearby, someone's engaged in a heated discussion about dinner seating. Apparently someone's second cousin has been moved from the left wing of the a la carte restaurant to the right, which is socially fatal, obviously. Another pair of passengers are discussing opera, except neither of them has actually been to one recently, but their vowels are doing most of the work. You pause near a deck chair and lean against the railing. The wood is warm from the sun, the breeze cool against your face. You can feel the faint vibration of the engines humming beneath your feet, almost soothing. It's easy to forget what an extraordinary thing this is, this promenade, this view, this ship. Everything around you, every inch of luxury is floating, moving, cutting across an ocean that would drown you in seconds if it had the chance. Time for a fringe detail. The Titanic had a fully enclosed promenade deck in first class, which was a rare design choice at the time. It protected passengers from wind, rain, and the undesirable company of anyone who didn't belong there. There were even heated benches in certain sections, though these were often claimed by passengers who'd perfected the fine art of occupying space aggressively without making eye contact. You start walking again, this time more slowly. People are watching you. Not obviously, not rudely, but they are. That's how it works here. Every glance is a mental footnote, every outfit a small political statement. Are you walking too fast? Too slow? Are your gloves creased? Is your companion, if you have one, at the correct angle to your stride? You spot one of the officers at the far end of the promenade talking to a cluster of passengers. Second Officer Charles Lightoller, perhaps. He's tall, square-jawed, and has the kind of casual confidence that either comes from years at sea or an unshakable belief that the rules don't apply to you. He laughs politely at something, then glances your way. Just a moment, just a flick of recognition. You nod, he nods, and the ship keeps moving. Now for your scholarly debate of the hour. Did passengers on the Titanic truly enjoy promenading, or was it just one more performance in a day of performances? Some historians suggest these walks were deeply social, a chance for informal introductions and whispered negotiations. Others point to the endless mentions of boredom at sea in letters and memoirs, implying that promenading was a stylish way to pass the time between meals and gossip. But maybe, as with most things in first class, it was both. A performance that became a pleasure, a ritual that offered just enough distraction to forget the miles of cold black water rolling beneath your shoes. You reach the end of the promenade and turn, letting the wind catch your scarf as you begin the slow walk back. The ship feels more alive now, the engine's heartbeat beneath the deck, the laughter rising from the reception rooms. Somewhere below, third-class passengers are likely dancing already, pressed into small spaces with fiddles and voices instead of orchestras and menus. But up here, on Promenade A, there's only the sea, the sun, and the soft rustle of silk on teakwood. You walk with measured grace, posture perfect, every step telling the world that you belong here, even if no one's quite sure what that means. Because on Titanic, walking isn't just walking, it's an art. The promenade fades behind you, but its performance still lingers. The hat is adjusted, the gloves smoothed, the small smile you've been wearing for the benefit of anyone observing, well, that stays on, just in case. You re-enter the ship's interior through a side door that leads back toward B-deck, where quiet waits behind velvet ropes and the corridors are lined with rich panelling that smells faintly of citrus oil and inherited money. It's late afternoon now, edging into that delicious limbo where the ship's energy tilts toward drama. You pass a steward wheeling a cart of freshly laundered linens. He nods, tight-lipped, and continues on without a word. That's the tone now. Low voices, half-closed doors. The energy is no longer social, it's private. Welcome to what might be first class's most sacred offering, personal space, or at least the illusion of it. You continue down the corridor, and it becomes immediately clear that not all suites are created equal. Some doors are propped open just slightly, revealing massive rooms within, sitting areas with velvet armchairs, floral arrangements that must have been smuggled aboard in a crate marked fragile and unnecessary, and wardrobe trunks standing like sentinels in the corners. Other suites are quieter, less grand, but no less intentional, the kind of rooms where secrets live comfortably. And speaking of secrets, this is the hour they start to unfurl. You've heard whispers, everyone has. The woman 3 doors down who changed her name before sailing. The young man travelling with his business partner, who curiously always leaves through the servants' corridor. The opera singer who dines alone but somehow still receives 2 sets of towels each morning. And then, of course, the married couple, who barely acknowledge each other by daylight but who lock their door at night like it's a confessional booth. Here's where we get into the architectural gossip. Certain first-class suites on the Titanic weren't just big, they were linked. Adjoining doors, shared salons, even private promenade access. And those features? They weren't always used as intended. Companion cabins, as they were often called, could be requested by families, travelling couples, or close friends. That term was stretched well beyond its polite limits by the 3rd day at sea. You slow your walk and lean gently against the wall near a suite marked B52. The door is open just enough to reveal a flash of pink silk, the kind that clings to the shape of a woman even after she's stepped out of it. A low voice murmurs inside, masculine, not unkind, and then laughter, light and practiced. You don't need to see more. This hallway is practically buzzing with unspoken stories. A steward emerges from a room ahead, carrying an empty tray and the expression of someone who has absolutely heard too much and will absolutely never repeat it. That's the first-class pact. Discretion isn't just expected, it's the currency. Gossip may run rampant below decks, but up here it's whispered, veiled in metaphor, and always plausibly deniable. Here's your quirky fact for the hour. Some of the most expensive suites on the Titanic had private bathrooms and separate quarters for personal staff. You weren't just rich, you travelled with people paid to stand in the next room until you needed your cufflinks adjusted or your pillow fluffed. One passenger, a famously exacting widow from Philadelphia, reportedly had her maid measure the room's lighting with a small brass instrument to ensure she didn't wrinkle her skin during rest. You turn down another corridor and find yourself walking parallel to the private promenade section reserved for the ultra-elite suites. On the other side of the wall, someone is laughing. A woman's voice, rich with confidence and just a touch of bourbon. Perhaps Lady Roth's. Perhaps someone pretending to be. The thing about this ship is that no one questions your title if your shoes are expensive enough. Now let's stir in a bit of scholarly debate. Was first-class privacy truly respected aboard the Titanic, or was it all theatre? Some historians argue that with stewards, maids and bellboys constantly flitting in and out, passengers were under near constant observation. Luxurious observation, but observation all the same. Others suggest that the social elite of 1912 had mastered the art of creating privacy even in shared spaces, using subtle gestures, servants as buffers, and a general refusal to acknowledge anything awkward unless it was dressed well and handed champagne. You stop beside a small alcove near the hallway's end, a hidden corner with a love seat and a decorative lamp, flickering gently. You sit for a moment, just long enough to absorb the strange energy of the space. You're surrounded by dozens of lives, and yet it's quiet. The kind of quiet that's been engineered. Everything is cushioned, sound, judgment, scandal. Even your thoughts feel softly muffled. It's in these tucked-away spaces where the real theatre unfolds. Love letters slipped under doors, husbands disappearing for walks that last just a little too long. Glances exchanged across the reception room that end in someone knocking twice, not once, at a certain hour. The ship may be rigidly structured by class, but inside first class it's more fluid than anyone wants to admit. As you rise, a nearby door opens, and for just a moment you see a woman standing in her suite in nothing but a silk robe and pearls. She looks directly at you, unflinching, like she's daring you to mention it. You don't. Of course not. You simply nod, as if what you've seen is entirely ordinary. And perhaps it is. On a ship where rooms cost more than most homes, where discretion is folded into every towel, and where even the walls have velvet ears, nothing is too scandalous. You continue on, back toward the public spaces, your footsteps swallowed by thick carpeting and silence. Every suite you pass holds a story, some sweet, some transactional, some deliciously indecent, and none of them will ever be written down. That's the deal. You can do nearly anything you want aboard the Titanic as long as you don't talk about it. And if you do, well, make sure it's wrapped in silk and tied with a bow. There's a buzz in the air now, not electric exactly, but social, like static woven from perfume and thinly veiled ambition. You've wandered back toward the central lounge, drawn by the soft swell of conversation and the clink of porcelain teacups that signals it's just about that time again. Not a mealtime, officially, but an unscheduled window of social opportunity where first-class passengers drift into shared spaces, not because they need company, but because it's dangerous to be forgotten. Visibility is everything, and the lounge is where visibility sharpens into influence. The first-class lounge is an Edwardian masterpiece of restraint and opulence, meaning it whispers wealth instead of shouting it. The room is panelled in delicate French walnut, each surface polished to a polite gleam. The ceiling rises in graceful arches, each one coffered and trimmed with pale gilding, like the inside of a music box designed by someone who charges by the glance. The carpet is thick, floral, and probably made from the woven sighs of bankrupt duchesses. You step inside and feel the warmth, not just from the coal-fired heating, but from the presence of power, money, and carefully arranged smiles. Ladies occupy most of the chairs and settees, though a few gentlemen have joined the scene, likely those who've grown weary of cigar smoke or feel the need to observe their wives and rivals in their natural habitat. A steward passes with a silver tray of brandy and sherry. Another distributes cards for bridge. Someone has opened a box of petit four, and now the room smells faintly of sugar and almonds. A woman near the fireplace is laughing at something that wasn't a joke. You find a seat near a tall window and settle in with the practiced grace of someone who knows they're being watched. Across from you, two women are deep in conversation, one of them waving a painted paper fan like she's conducting an orchestra of gossip. You pretend not to listen, which, of course, is just part of the ritual. "Did you hear about the Kerrys?" one of them says, voice low but not low enough. "Oh yes," the other murmurs, eyes wide with delight. 4 trunks and not a single invitation. Can you imagine? You can, and you do. The Kerrys are new money after all, department store fortune. Decorative without being historic, which is unforgivable, and that's what this lounge is really for. It's not relaxation, it's reconnaissance. People don't just talk here, they place bets with their words. They measure each other in compliments, coded criticisms, and the occasional strategic act of generosity. A kind word about someone's shawl can pay dividends if that same person is hosting a luncheon in New York next week. A raised eyebrow over someone's mismatched gloves might cost them an invitation. It's diplomacy disguised as small talk. Now for your historical detail of the hour. The first-class lounge on Titanic was modelled after the Palace of Versailles, specifically the style of Louis XV. Every table, every panel, every chair was built to mimic that level of royal comfort, right down to the gilt-framed mirrors and tasselled draperies. The room was designed to flatter the passengers as much as the passengers flattered each other, and it worked. People didn't just sit here, they displayed here. You glance to your left. A young man is deep in conversation with an older woman, likely his aunt or someone claiming to be. They're bent over a pile of papers and telegrams, speaking in hushed tones, fingers tracing columns of numbers and names. They don't notice you watching, but the woman looks up suddenly, and there's something about her expression, sharp, almost predatory, that suggests this isn't just travel. It's manoeuvring, perhaps business, perhaps matchmaking, possibly both. Let's drop in a delightful fringe fact. Some first-class passengers used this lounge to arrange marriages. Quietly, of course, not with open proposals or dramatic declarations, but through strategic seating, subtle matchmaking, and long conversations about dowries disguised as tea chats. It was common to accidentally seat certain families near each other. One documented case tells of a steel baron's daughter who met her future husband over a shared plate of lemon biscuits and the mutual realization that their fathers owned adjacent shipping lines. Romance, Edwardian style. Your own tea arrives, placed silently by a steward who seems to know the exact moment to intervene without interrupting. You sip, watching the steam curl upward like the ghost of a good idea. The cup is fine china, light as a whisper, the pattern so intricate it's almost smug. You wonder briefly how many hands this cup passed through before it reached yours. How many hours of polishing, packing, planning went into ensuring that, in this moment, you feel like the main character. Across the room, someone drops a playing card. A few heads turn, the steward picks it up. The moment passes. But it reminds you everything here is fragile. Not just the porcelain or the lace, the social ecosystem is delicate. Always in motion, always balancing. Say the wrong thing, wear the wrong colour, compliment the wrong person too earnestly, and you might feel the shift. A coldness, an empty chair where someone used to sit, an invitation that never arrives. This leads us neatly to your scholarly debate of the hour. Was the social manoeuvring of first-class passengers on the Titanic genuinely influential, or simply ceremonial? Some historians argue that these tea-fueled conversations helped drive real alliances, business mergers, political partnerships, even high society's slow shift toward accepting American new money. Others say it was all fluff, theatre, a fantasy performed by people desperate to matter on a ship that, quite literally, was too big to fail. But one thing is certain, these lounges were pressure cookers under the prettiest lid imaginable. You finish your tea and stand. The room continues without you, its hum uninterrupted, its politics still in play. You nod to a passing couple who return the gesture with the kind of smile that means nothing and everything. Your presence has been noted, your position preserved for now. As you leave the lounge, the light has changed. It's lower now, warmer. The kind of light that makes the brass fixtures glow and turns every window into a painting. You walk the corridor again with that slight lift in your posture. The lounge may have looked like an afternoon break, but you know better. It was a boardroom, a battlefield, a ballroom of power dressed in walnut and velvet, and you played your part perfectly. By late afternoon, the golden light pouring through the promenade windows starts to feel expensive. Everything aboard the Titanic has that effect after a while. The chairs, the teacups, even the time itself. It's not just passing, it's curated, sculpted, and the most curated thing of all, the cost of living in this little slice of Edwardian heaven. Because, darling, nothing about first class is subtle when it comes to money. In fact, money is the invisible passenger riding in every room, every outfit, every perfectly balanced dessert cart. You're walking now not toward anything in particular, just letting your feet drift while your thoughts spiral around a number you heard at tea earlier. Someone, a banker's daughter with a voice like a violin, had been explaining a little too loudly that the most expensive suite on the ship cost £870 for a one-way trip. That's nearly 4 threefids in those 12 money. You do a little mental math and realise that in today's terms, that's more than 120,000, possibly enough to put a kid through college, buy a small house, or charter an entirely separate yacht. And here, that same sum gets you a cabin. Granted, it's a suite the size of a New York apartment, with a private sitting room, 2 bedrooms, a full bathroom, a fireplace, your own promenade space, and servants' quarters. But still, imagine spending the equivalent of a year's salary for 5 days of floating theatre. That's not transportation, that's ego with wallpaper. You duck into a side hallway and glance at the posted ticket fare sheet pinned discreetly near the purser's office. It's not meant for passengers like you, it's meant for stewards, but curiosity is currency here, and you've got plenty of that. The breakdown is both fascinating and mildly horrifying. A first-class single-occupancy parlour suite, £870 a standard first-class cabin, around £30 and £10. Second class, £13 to £19. Third class, as low as £3 steerage, if we're being honest, £3. For that amount, someone's entire life was packed into a wooden trunk, their hopes tucked inside like sweaters. They were headed to a new world in the bowels of a ship while you were choosing between pheasant or duck à l'orange. It's jarring, but only briefly, because just then a steward passes carrying a tray of lemon biscuits, and you remember that one of the reasons you're in first class is to not think about third. Let's dive into a delicious little historical detail. Some of the first-class passengers didn't just pay for themselves. They brought staff, whole staff, maids, valets, nannies, sometimes even personal cooks. These staff members travelled in second class, or more often, in cramped crew quarters, They were summoned with a bell, lived below, and were expected to appear wrinkle-free and ready at a moment's notice, regardless of whether they'd had dinner or sleep. One particularly affluent passenger, a tobacco magnate from Ohio, was rumoured to have brought 4 personal attendants, one just for shoe polishing. The price of a first-class ticket didn't just buy comfort, it bought distance, from noise, from work, from obligation, and most notably, from the people who made all that comfort possible. As you continue your stroll, you pass a gentleman explaining to his daughter that his company will write off the voyage as a business expense. She nods politely, clearly uninterested in accounting, but fascinated by the lace trim on her own gloves. Overhearing this, another man nearby mutters that his trip was covered by his estate trustee, and you realise, even here, among the financially unbothered, there are layers. Quiet comparisons, subtle boasts, someone paid, someone didn't, someone inherited, someone married very, very well. And here's where the scholars lose their monocles in heated debate. Was the price of first-class passage on the Titanic truly reflective of value, or was it inflated by exclusivity and ego? Some argue that the experience was worth every pound. They point to the lavish meals, the staff-to-guest ratio, the amenities, hello, mechanical camel and the sheer novelty of floating in more luxury than most homes. Others claim it was smoke and mirrors, social theatre sold to the vain and bored, and a clever grift by the White Star Line. You weren't paying for travel, you were paying to be seen travelling. You stop for a moment outside one of the first-class suite doors, the brass nameplate polished to perfection. You try to imagine what it feels like to walk through that door knowing you've paid more for 5 days than many will earn in 5 years. Maybe it feels like success, maybe it feels like armour, maybe it's just habit. For some of these people, money has always been there, like weather. Sometimes stormy, sometimes calm, but ever present. Let's sprinkle in a fringe detail, shall we? There's a record of one passenger, William T. Stead, a journalist and spiritualist, who openly questioned the morality of first-class indulgence. He wrote, weeks before boarding, about how the modern rich had built themselves a palace of ease while the world burned. He wasn't wrong. He also went down with the ship. You make your way to the purser's office, where a few passengers are inquiring about wireless messages. Some are collecting wires from the mainland, news from London, updates from America, but one woman is arguing about a bill, not her own, but her and her maid's. Apparently her steward charged for extra bath towels. She insists that as a first-class passenger, her servant should receive the same comforts. The purser smiles the smile of someone who's been yelled at in 4 languages and agrees to strike the charge. Because up here, money is never really about the amount. It's about the gesture, the performance. The illusion that you're not actually spending anything, that wealth simply expands to meet desire. Need something? Pay. Want more? Lose a ring, buy another. The economy of first class isn't about budgeting, it's about buffering. Cushioning yourself from inconvenience, discomfort, and, if possible, reality. And yet, as you walk back toward the staircase, you can't help but wonder what's happening far below, in third class, where people paid £3 to sleep in bunks and share bathrooms, and eat stew off tin plates. Did they laugh as loudly as the women in the lounge? Did they flirt harder? Sing better? Live more? But that thought passes, not because it's untrue, but because in first class you're trained to let it pass. You reach your suite. The lights have been dimmed slightly. A fresh flower has been placed in a crystal vase near the mirror. On your pillow, a small card printed with tomorrow's weather forecast and a reminder to set your luggage out if disembarking in Queenstown. The price of a first-class ticket bought you that too. Gentle instruction, perfectly timed. Luxury, after all, is knowing what happens next. There's a scratching sound outside your suite. A soft, delicate scrape like fingernails on the velvet. Not ominous, just strange. You crack the door, expecting a steward, or perhaps someone returning a borrowed shawl, and find yourself face to face with a small dog wearing what can only be described as a rhinestone collar and the exhausted expression of a being deeply overqualified for its species. Behind it, a maid hurries forward, out of breath and clearly mortified. "I'm terribly sorry, or miss," she says, scooping up the creature like a pastry with legs. "Lady Roth's Pekingese slipped away again." Of course he did. Welcome to another unsung feature of Titanic's first class. The pets. Not metaphorical ones, not the kind you whisper about after someone exits a room, but actual living, breathing animals who sailed alongside their pampered owners like tiny furry aristocrats. You close your door, now thoroughly curious, and set off to investigate. Because if there's anything more fascinating than watching humans play dress-up at sea, it's watching animals do it without even trying. You don't have to go far. Just 2 corridors down, a steward is escorting a white French bulldog on a leather leash, while a woman in pearls instructs him on how far the dog is allowed to walk. "Just the length of the promenade," she says firmly. "And not near the engine smell." You nod politely as you pass, pretending not to stare at the dog, whose collar appears to be genuine leather trimmed in silver. The dog regards you with a look that can only be described as passive disdain. You've been judged and found adequate. According to the purser's records, yes, those exist. Titanic had at least a dozen dogs aboard. The majority of them belonged to first-class passengers, naturally, because who else could afford to bring a living handbag on a transatlantic voyage? There were also a few birds, some cats, unofficial, and often employed as rodent control, and, in one magnificently bizarre case, a woman travelling with a Pomeranian and a letter from her psychic assuring her the ship was doomed. She brought both aboard anyway. You make your way to the boat deck, where the afternoon sun catches on every brass rail and polished bit of wood, casting halos around people who are very much used to being haloed. A small group has gathered near a quiet corner where a pair of children are cooing over a spaniel. Its ears are brushed and glossy, and someone's tied a pink ribbon around its neck. You approach offering a nod and ask the woman nearest to you, blonde, cloaked in beige wool, how many pets are on board. "Oh, at least 15, she says casually, as if this is perfectly ordinary. "Though I heard a rumour about someone bringing a monkey. Surely not true, and monkeys are so second class." You're not entirely convinced she's joking. You stay for a moment, watching the spaniel sniff at the toe of someone's boot before settling into the shade beneath a wicker chair. The woman explains that there's a special area set aside for the dogs just below the ship's kennels on F-deck. It's supervised by a member of the crew who feeds and exercises them daily, takes notes on their behaviour, and, if the pet's important enough, reports back to the owner with updates. One of the dogs, she tells you with a chuckle, is reportedly so well trained it refuses to sit unless there's a rug. Now here's your official quirky detail of the day. At one point during the voyage, someone hosted a dog show on board. Yes, really. An informal one, likely held on the boat deck or one of the promenades, depending on who you asked. Prizes were not monetary, of course, that would be gauche, but included ribbons, biscuits, and in one case a sapphire collar charm. Rumour has it that the judge wasn't even a crew member, but an ageing aristocrat whose only qualification was knowing a proper dog when she sees one. As you continue your walk, you start to notice more signs of this secret pet society. Bowls of water discreetly placed near suite doors, steward conversations mentioning leash times, and even a faint barking echoing up from below deck. The dogs may not be everywhere, but they are known, and they are indulged, because after all they belong to people who are never told no. Let's slip in the scholarly debate here. Was the presence of pets aboard the Titanic a symbol of comfort or an absurdity too extravagant for its own good? Some argue that it humanised the voyage. Pets provided emotional grounding for their owners, especially those used to sprawling estates and staff who knew their poodle's middle name. Others see it as tone-deaf, a miniature Versailles, trailing a ship full of people, many of whom wouldn't survive the week. Either way, the truth is undeniable. Animals weren't just allowed aboard, they were expected. You circle back toward the lounge where someone is telling a story about a parrot that used to belong to a Russian countess. It's unclear whether the parrot is on board or just haunting the conversation. Still, no one questions the tale. In first class, all absurdities are plausible until proven inconvenient. And here's your fringe moment. Edith Rosenbaum, the music box pig lady from earlier, she insisted the pig was not only her good luck charm, but her spiritual advisor. She brought it to meals. She claimed it helped her make financial decisions. When the iceberg hit, she stuffed it under her arm and took it into the lifeboat. Survival apparently has many forms. By now the sun has dipped slightly, casting long shadows across the deck. A steward rings a small bell in the distance, signalling the approach of dinner, and slowly the crowd begins to shift. Hats are adjusted, gloves retrieved. Dogs are collected and swept back toward their quarters, tails wagging or not, depending on how much social capital they burn through today. You pause for a moment before heading back inside. The Atlantic rolls out endlessly in every direction, blue and silver and silent. Somewhere below your feet, tucked into crates or baskets or custom monogrammed kennels, the pets of the wealthy curl into their blankets, oblivious to the grandeur around them. They don't care about menus or maitre d's or who's been seated where. They care about warmth and food and the people who love them enough to carry them across oceans, and maybe, just maybe, that's the smartest thing anyone on this ship has done. Somewhere around your third glass of wine that evening, it finally hits you just how strange this cast of characters really is. Not just wealthy, not just well-dressed, but truly unflinchingly odd. First class aboard the Titanic isn't just a gathering of the rich, it's a parade of the peculiar, and not in the charming, quirky uncle kind of way. We're talking the kind of eccentricities that only bloom when someone has too much time, too much money, and absolutely no one around to tell them maybe not. You're seated in the lounge again, this time with a slimmer crowd. Most of the passengers have drifted off to the smoking rooms or their suites to prepare for one of those entirely unnecessary midnight snacks, but you're staying put, sipping slowly, watching, because this is when the really fascinating ones come out. There are people who speak in half-truths, who casually mention the King of Belgium as if he's a cousin, who carry walking sticks that might also be weapons or instruments, or trophies. A man near the corner has been holding court for nearly half an hour. He's tall with an unsettlingly even moustache and a ring on every finger, each one more cursed looking than the last. He's currently telling anyone who'll listen that he once invested in an ostrich farm, lost everything, then made it all back selling fireproof wallpaper. No one believes him. But no one wants to stop him either, because what if it's true? Welcome to the unofficial Titanic First Class Oddball Club. You're in excellent company. Let's start with one of the known members, Benjamin Guggenheim. Yes, that Guggenheim, the mining tycoon. He's on board with his valet, his mistress, let's be polite and call her his travel companion, and roughly enough luggage to support a 3-month theatrical tour. He's eccentric in the way only real money can be. Overdressed, overly composed, and carrying himself like a man who's read too many Greek epics and now thinks he is one. Earlier in the voyage, a steward reported seeing Guggenheim taking brandy with breakfast while discussing which colours best reflect moral courage. That alone qualifies him for the club. But he sealed his reputation when, shortly after boarding, he ordered a full-length mirror to be brought to his suite, not because he wanted to check his appearance, but because he missed his dressing room at home. Rumour says he's brought no fewer than 12 hats. Nearby you spot Dorothy Gibson, the American silent film star. She's beautiful, sure, but she's also delightfully unpredictable. Known for her habit of carrying little scripts in her handbag to recite lines from during lulls in conversation. Allegedly, she asked a steward to construct a mock stage out of steamer trunks so she could practice monologues by moonlight. You're not sure if this is performance art or a cry for help, but it's definitely entertaining. Then there's Lady Duff Gordon, fashion designer, known snob, and walking weapon of mass judgment. Her style is impeccable, but what really makes her unforgettable is her tongue. She can flay someone's reputation in a sentence and somehow make them thank her for it. A steward once described her as a woman who could put out a fire by glaring at it. You heard she has refused to dine with 2 different families so far on the voyage because she found their table manners medieval. Now for a fringe addition to this glittering chaos. There was a first-class passenger aboard named Colonel Archibald Gracie IV, a Civil War historian who reportedly spent hours pacing the decks while narrating battles to himself. Loudly. He was known to wave an imaginary sword during particularly animated retellings of Gettysburg. The stewards didn't stop him. Why would they? He tipped well and didn't start actual duels. Let's throw in your historical fact here. The First Class Manifest reads like a who's who of the gilded elite and not just business moguls. There were artists, actors, adventurers, spiritualists, and enough amateur Egyptologists to staff a fake tomb. Some of these people travelled the world not because they had to, but because staying in one place too long meant running out of people to impress. The Titanic offered them something rare, a floating Syrie, a captive audience, and just enough distance from dry land to excuse anything too unusual. And here's where the scholars get twitchy. Was first class aboard the Titanic truly a reflection of the world's most powerful, or was it more like a circus car at sea, a safe space for the eccentric rich to exist without consequence? Some argue that the social elite were genuinely shaping the world's future here, striking business deals and arranging dynastic marriages between bowls of consommé. Others say these passengers were mostly ornamental, too rich to work, too powerful to fade, clinging to relevance with monogrammed fingernails and bizarre hobbies. Both views somehow feel accurate. You sip your wine and glance around again. A woman near the fireplace is fanning herself aggressively, not from heat but from irritation. Apparently, someone made the mistake of offering her a seat without realizing she always sits with her back to the window. Another woman is reading palms. No one asked her to. She just started. One gentleman, dressed like he's fleeing a duel, has a stack of coins in front of him and is flipping them slowly, muttering something about probability and the illusion of free will. You're starting to wonder if the ship is powered not by coal, but by unmedicated egos. A steward walks past with a silver tray of brandy. You wave him over. He sets a glass before you, perfectly placed. And as you take your first sip, it hits you. This is what money really buys. Not just silk and silver and extra space, but permission. Permission to be ridiculous. To invent yourself from scratch. To tell a stranger you once punched a king and have them consider it. On this ship, identity is flexible. Eccentricity is admired, and oddness isn't a liability. Is a form of entertainment. You sit back, content to observe the parade. You've learned not to react too visibly. You nod when someone tells you they've been communicating with Beethoven through table rapping. You murmur how fascinating when another explains his theory that icebergs are conscious entities sent to balance out global arrogance. And all the while, you know exactly where you are. Aboard the Titanic, in the heart of first class, surrounded by silk, silver, and people just one cocktail away from launching a new religion. And the best part? No one here thinks they're the odd one. You're back in the corridor now, and it's quieter than usual. The air feels heavier here, not with danger, but with secrecy. It's the time of evening when the grand parts of the ship begin to dim just slightly, when candles are lit in private salons, when whispered conversations replace laughter, and when stewards start pretending they don't hear things they very much hear. You walk slowly, passing rows of stateroom doors, all of them identical in design, but each hiding a wildly different reality. The truth is, no matter how large your suite, there's only so much privacy on a ship. There are walls, of course, thick ones lined with all the illusion of discretion money can buy. But sound travels, so do scents and rumours, especially on this ship where a steward can't turn a corner without catching something unusual out of the corner of his eye. It makes you wonder just how private anyone really is in first class. You pause at a bend in the corridor where a steward's cart has been abandoned, half covered with a linen cloth. Beneath it you glimpse a tray of uneaten canapes and 2 champagne glasses, one with lipstick, the other with what looks suspiciously like a monogram etched into the base. Probably retrieved from a room where the conversation turned too personal to continue in front of food. You move on. Let's talk about privacy, shall we? There's a fascinating contradiction on the Titanic, especially in first class, where everyone lives in luxury but very few live alone. Cabins are shared, suites are shared. Even the grandest rooms often come with connecting doors, built not for escape but for management. Husbands and wives, mothers and daughters, valets and employers, secret lovers and not-so-secret ones, all bundled up in a web of proximity that guarantee things will be overheard. This leads you, eventually, to one of the lounges reserved for reading and quiet conversation. It's almost empty now, lit by a pair of wall sconces and a dying fire that no one has asked to be fed. You sit in the corner, letting the stillness wrap around you, and there it is, just faintly, the soft sound of footsteps in the hallway, followed by a murmur, a door opening, a laugh, a click of glass against wood, then silence again. These walls may be gilded, but they're not blind. And the stewards? Let's just say they're better informed than most news observers. They know who's travelling under what name and who's not where they're supposed to be, which suitcases have initials that don't match the passenger list. They know who tips well and who snores. One steward, assigned to the B-deck suites, was said to keep a handwritten chart noting which passengers requested extra pillows, who ordered late-night champagne, and who took breakfast alone 2 mornings in a row after sharing dinner the night before. Here's your historical detail of the night. The ship had over 300 first-class passengers and just under 60 stewards assigned to their care. That's roughly 1 steward for every 5 guests, and those men were expected to know everything: habits, preferences, allergies, schedules. They rotated in shifts but were trained to appear tireless, invisible, and omniscient. Some passengers even brought their own staff to supplement the White Star service, turning their rooms into private estates afloat. You rise and wander toward one of the more opulent suites, not to intrude, just to pass. Suite B58 belonged to the Astors, though you wouldn't know it from the outside, only from the footman standing discreetly nearby, arms folded, face blank. He doesn't stop you, just offers a nod that says, "I've seen everything and I've judged none of it." Yet. Now for the fringe fact. One first-class woman requested that her stateroom be wallpapered upon arrival. Wallpapered? At sea. Her staff had packed pre-cut sections of her favourite drawing room pattern, and stewards were instructed to install them over the standard wood panelling. No nails, just a light adhesive and thin pins, all removed before docking. It didn't matter that the voyage was only days long, the point was not to live in a space that wasn't already hers. Wealth is weird like that. You reach the end of the hallway and pause near a steward's service door. You glance around, no one's watching, and push it open just a crack. Inside, chaos, the controlled, muffled kind. You glimpse a small galley with trays stacked 3 high, a steward scribbling notes. Another carrying a chamber pot with the kind of expression that deserves a medal. Voices bounce from the walls. Fast, efficient, familiar. There's no carpet here, no art, just function. It's the engine room of first-class comfort, and you close the door quietly, not wanting to disrupt the magic. Back in the corridor, you walk past a suite with laughter echoing faintly from inside. Someone claps. A woman gasps. You don't stop, you just catalogue it. Another mental note in your collection of the things that happen behind these identical doors. And here's the scholarly debate that scholars love to chew on. Did first-class passengers truly experience privacy? Or was it just a performance? Some argue the level of attention they received made real solitude impossible. Every need anticipated, every move observed. Others say the illusion of privacy was enough. As long as it felt private, it was private, and maybe that's all they wanted, to believe that behind closed doors they could remove their social masks, even if the walls were listening. You return to your suite eventually, letting yourself in with a soft sigh and peeling off your gloves like someone shedding a roll. The room is immaculate. Not just clean, curated, your nightdress is already laid out. The bed turned down, a glass of water sits on your bedside table. You didn't ask for any of it, but someone knew. That's what first-class service is, the eerie precision of being known without having to explain yourself. And yet you wonder, who folded your nightgown? Who noticed your perfume was running low and left a fresh bottle on the vanity? Who's written down that you take 2 lumps of sugar and not 3 and remembered it every single time? You lie back on the bed and stare at the ceiling. It's quiet again, but the kind of quiet that's layered. Just beyond the wall, someone is brushing hair. Further down the corridor, a shoe drops, a door creaks open and shuts again. No one's alone on this ship. Not really, but as long as the service is seamless and the curtains stay drawn, you can pretend. And on the Titanic, pretending is a full-time luxury. It's late now, not midnight late, but that dreamy in-between hour when the day has dimmed into velvet, and even the chatter of the socialites has softened into something closer to a murmur. You're back on the upper decks, walking slowly, sipping the last of your port from a delicate crystal glass you forgot to return after dinner. The ship moves so smoothly it barely feels like motion anymore. The sky above is a thick dome of stars, each one brighter than seems scientifically necessary. For a moment, it feels like the ocean has dissolved into the heavens and the Titanic is floating through space itself. You drift toward the Marconi room, following the quiet energy that seems to pulse around it. Tucked just off the boat deck, this unassuming little room hums, not with music or gossip, but with something far more precious in 1912, information. Inside, the wireless operators are hard at work, flicking switches and tapping keys surrounded by wires, dials, and the occasional cup of cold coffee. They barely look up as you pass. They've been at it for hours. They always are. Here's the truth. While the rest of first class is wrapped in luxury and illusion, the Marconi room is the only place on the ship that's tied directly to the world outside. It's the heartbeat of modernity, beating quietly behind a door most passengers don't think twice about. You lean against the wall just outside, trying not to eavesdrop, but definitely eavesdropping. Through the narrow pane of glass, you can see one of the operators, likely Harold Bride, the junior wireless man, staring intently at a strip of paper, reading the dots and dashes of Morse, like it's the only language that still makes sense. He looks young, tired, focused in the way people are when what they're doing really matters, even if no one else sees it. Let's drop in your historical fact here. Titanic's wireless system wasn't just cutting edge, it was overachieving. Operated by the Marconi Company, it was capable of sending and receiving messages across thousands of miles. That meant passengers in first class could send personal telegrams directly to friends, family, and business partners back on land. Want to tell your cousin you've secured the silk shipment? Done. Need to remind your mistress in Boston not to write anything in ink? Easy. It was fast, futuristic, and for the wealthy a dream come true. And they used it. Oh, did they use it? The wireless room received hundreds of messages during the voyage, so many that operators were often backed up for hours. Most were from first-class passengers, of course, and most were entirely non-essential. One woman sent her dog's daily health report to her sister. A financier reportedly asked his assistant to move shares in a copper mine based on a dinner conversation he'd had with a fellow passenger over lamb chops. Another guest, a well-known actress, sent an urgent telegram to her agent demanding her next script include a stronger female lead. But here's where the quirky detail comes in. A few passengers used the wireless system not to communicate with the world, but to flirt. Morse code became a sort of secret love language for the daring and bored. A young man allegedly began sending testing messages to a woman aboard another ship. Just harmless dashes and dots at first, but then longer phrases. The operators played along, sometimes delivering the messages with a wink. Whether the romance ever went beyond key taps is unclear, but it gives you a sense of how much people wanted to connect, even through static. You walk away from the Marconi room eventually, back toward the staterooms, and consider something you heard at lunch. Someone complained that the wireless was slow, as if they were waiting on an answer from the moon. The irony, of course, is that they were travelling faster than any other luxury vessel in history, surrounded by gold and music and pastries no one could spell, but still wanted their telegrams to arrive before the goose course. That's the thing about progress, it only counts if it feels instant. You pause now near one of the corridor windows and look out at the night again. The stars have shifted slightly. The sea is dark and still. There's no moon, just the faint sheen of light thrown from the ship's portholes. And beneath it all, that humming, the low rhythmic vibration of the engines, a sound that feels like safety but also like arrogance. The operators, of course, are still tapping away behind you, working through the backlog of personal messages, company orders, even a few press updates. What they may not know, what few people know yet, is that the Californian, another ship sailing nearby, has sent a warning about ice. Several warnings, actually. Some have been delivered to the bridge. Some, likely, are still lying in a pile, unread, in the wireless room, beneath a stack of telegrams about fur deliveries and wedding plans. And here's the scholarly debate. Should the Titanic's wireless operators have prioritised safety messages over personal ones? Historians still argue. Some say Bride and Jack Phillips were overwhelmed, doing their best in a system that wasn't designed for urgency. Others claim they missed crucial warnings out of sheer exhaustion or distraction, more concerned with passenger telegrams than with navigational hazards, and yet no one blames them entirely. The system itself was new, the protocols unclear, the trust in the ship absolute. You head back toward your suite now, the hallways dimmer, the silence deeper. The world outside seems far away. The ship, for all its movement, feels strangely still, as if it's suspended between time zones, between centuries. You wonder what telegrams are still being written, what messages are crossing invisible miles right now, who's waiting for word that won't arrive. Inside your room, a note has been left on the side table. It's a reply to the message you sent this morning, to your friend in New York. Her answer is short. Tell me everything, dying of curiosity I am. You smile, fold the paper and place it beside your brush. You'll have a lot to tell her. About the dinners, the dresses, the promenade strolls, the dogs, the eccentrics, the constant buzz of life at sea. You just hope the message gets through. Sleep doesn't come quickly aboard a ship like this. Not because it's uncomfortable. Please, this bed is softer than most royal decrees, but because there's too much to process. The room is quiet now, aside from the muted vibration of the engines and the occasional creak of the walls adjusting to their voyage. The sconces have been dimmed to a sleepy amber, and your dressing gown is draped neatly over the foot of the bed, right where your steward placed it. There's a soft, linen-covered hot water bottle beneath the covers, already warm. The White Star Line thought of everything, didn't they? But even with all this comfort, no, because of it, you're wide awake. There's something about sleeping on a floating palace that refuses to let you forget you're suspended between sky and abyss. So you rise, stretch, and wrap yourself in the kind of robe that was probably stitched by hand in a Swiss chalet. You crack the door open and step out. The corridor is almost completely still, save for the low footsteps of a steward in the distance. You nod at him, he nods back. This hour belongs to ghosts and night staff. It's a perfect time to investigate how the first-class elites sleep. You already know this much. Everyone in first class has a nighttime routine as meticulously maintained as their social schedule. It's not just about going to bed, it's about arriving at sleep, escorted by rituals. Some passengers request warm milk at precisely 10:30 p.m, delivered with a linen napkin and a silver spoon, naturally. Others require a specific brand of lavender oil to be dabbed on the edges of their pillowcases, and one particularly exacting gentleman reportedly has his manservant iron the bed sheets after they've already been made, just to remove the emotional tension from the fabric. You head up toward one of the lounges, still lit but quiet now. The chairs have been fluffed, the ashtrays emptied. A few late-night readers are still seated by the fireplace, flipping pages slowly, as if doing so too loudly might summon conversation. One woman is knitting by firelight. She looks up at you, offers a slow, knowing smile, then returns to her yarn. She understands. Sleep isn't just a physical act aboard the Titanic. It's a negotiation. Let's pause for your historical tidbit here. The first-class staterooms were equipped with electric heaters, call buttons, and even bedside lamps, luxuries so advanced at the time they bordered on science fiction. Some suites even had ensuite bathrooms with hot and cold running water, at a time when half of rural England still fetched water from a pump. These passengers were adjusting the temperature of their nighttime baths by turning gold-plated knobs. You make your way down the corridor again, passing stateroom doors that whisper their own secrets. Behind one, you hear muffled laughter, probably a late-night card game. Behind another, someone is softly playing the piano. The melody is barely audible, but you recognise the song, Song d'automne. It drifts through the corridor like perfume, clinging gently before disappearing. You arrive now at one of the shared bathrooms. Not yours, of course, you have your own, but this one is unoccupied, and you can't resist. Inside, the floor is covered in tiny mosaic tiles, the fixtures shining with recent polish. There's a clawfoot tub large enough to be threatening, and a marble-topped vanity lined with folded towels and small dishes of soap. The mirror above it reflects your face in soft candlelight, and you notice oddly that you look richer than you feel. That's the Titanic for you. It makes you believe the fantasy, even in a bathrobe. Now for your fringe fact. One first-class woman allegedly requested that her mattress be replaced halfway through the voyage because she sensed it was Irish. Whether this was a matter of superstition, prejudice, or madness is unclear. The staff, of course, complied, because up here eccentricity is just another accessory. You return to your stateroom eventually, past the now empty lounge and the steward who offers a quiet good night as you pass. Inside, the bed is still warm, still perfect. You slide beneath the covers and glance once more at the note card on the side table, the one listing tomorrow's events. Breakfast in the dining saloon at 8 o'clock, followed by a charity auction in the reception room, and then tea at 4, where someone is expected to unveil a new hat that has apparently been smuggled aboard like contraband silk. And here's the scholarly debate. Was the nighttime experience aboard the Titanic truly restful, or was it another stage in the day's performance? Some historians argue that first-class passengers, especially women, never fully relaxed. Even bedtime was a ritual of appearance. Hair curled, nightgowns tailored, sleep masks made of lace. Others believe this was the one time they could let the mask drop, be themselves, and curl into the anonymity of dim lighting and silence. But you suspect the truth sits somewhere in between. You lie still, eyes open, letting the hum of the ship cradle you into something close to peace. But even as you begin to drift, the thoughts remain. Who else is awake right now? What messages are still being sent through the Marconi system? What secrets are being whispered behind doors? What strange, powerful lives are stretching out in all directions, just feet from yours? The engines thrum beneath you, deep and patient. And somewhere above, stars are wheeling in their ancient courses, oblivious to fine china and four-poster beds. Eventually, you sleep, but not before whispering a tiny wish into the dark that the ship keeps moving, that the lights stay on, that the night remains exactly as beautiful and unknowable as it is now. You wake slowly, not to noise, not to light, but to a feeling, a kind of stillness that doesn't feel like rest, but like a held breath. The room is dim, painted in soft blue shadows. The soft linen sheets are tangled around your legs, warm and faintly scented with lavender. For a moment you can't remember where you are. The silence is too complete. Then the low, familiar hum returns, the pulse of the engine steady and deep, and you remember Titanic, the floating city, the dream that sails. You stretch and reach for the watch on your bedside table. It's early. Too early. The ship still feels asleep around you. No clinking trays. No soft murmurs in the hallway. Even the usual creaks of the walls settling into their day are absent, like the ship itself is in meditation. You rise, wrap yourself in your robe, and step into the corridor. It's nearly empty, the electric sconces glowing dimly, as though not quite ready to commit to the day. A steward passes you quietly, giving a slight bow. He looks a little pale. You don't think much of it at first. Oh, maybe it's just early. Maybe he's tired. You continue walking, down toward the grand staircase, the ornate banister catching the faintest bit of gaslight. You pause at the top landing, gazing down. The floor below gleams, polished wood, silent and undisturbed. The cherub lamp at the foot of the stairs glows softly. You'd almost believe the ship was paused in time, like a museum before opening hours. But then you notice something odd. A few passengers are already awake, dressed even. Not the usual morning robe and slippers shuffle, but fully dressed. Some with hats, some even gloved. You descend the stairs slowly, watching them move toward the promenade deck with an odd kind of focus. They're not chatting, they're not admiring the sky, they're just walking. Outside, the cold hits you like a whisper through silk. It's sharper than yesterday. The sky is vast and indifferent, the water a mirror of stars. A few passengers are clustered near the railings. Not many, just enough to register as unusual. You approach a man in a heavy coat, someone you vaguely recognise from dinner service, and ask quietly, "Is something going on?" He glances at you, his expression unreadable. "They say we hit something," he replies. "An iceberg, maybe. Nothing serious, of course." Your mouth opens, then closes. Iceberg? The word lands like a stone in the middle of all this velvet. But no alarms are ringing, no officers are running. There's no shouting, no panic, just a few whispers and a little cold air. You return to your cabin, almost embarrassed by the way your heart is beating. Because surely, if anything were wrong, someone would say something. You'd know, wouldn't you? You ring for your steward just to check. When he arrives, he's composed but slightly flushed. "Nothing to worry about, miss," he says. "The ship stopped briefly. There's some minor damage, but all under control. The captain is speaking with the engineers now." You want to believe him, and you do, mostly, but something's changed. Here's your historical fact. At 11:40 p.m. on April 14th, 1912, Titanic struck an iceberg off the coast of Newfoundland. The impact sliced open multiple compartments on the starboard side, below the waterline. At first, the damage didn't seem catastrophic. The ship barely shuddered. Passengers in first class reported hearing nothing more than a muffled scrape, like a heavy trunk being dragged across a floor. But beneath the decks, water was already surging in, and now, your quirky detail, some passengers actually slept through the collision. One woman famously complained that the noise had shaken her teacups, but assumed it was part of regular engine procedure. Another man reportedly called for his valet to bring his fur coat so he could go inspect the excitement on deck. He brought a brandy and a cigar with him. And here's where the scholarly debate starts tightening its collar. Why didn't anyone panic? Why didn't the first-class passengers respond with urgency? Some historians argue that it was precisely the environment of luxury that lulled them into calm. The ship was too grand to fail, the officers too polished to be worried. Others suggest it was the British stoicism of the era. Keep calm, carry on, and look fashionable doing it. You sit back on the edge of your bed now, the weight of the robe pulling gently on your shoulders. You look around the room, the fine details, the rich woodwork, the velvet drapes, and you feel something you haven't felt once since you boarded. Fragility. Because suddenly, the flowers on the nightstand feel too soft. The art on the walls too small, the lights too warm for what you're starting to suspect. The ship may be unsinkable on paper, but paper burns. You step to the vanity and pour yourself a glass of water. Your hands tremble a little, the water ripples. That steady hum is still there. But now that you're listening closely, it feels more like a heartbeat than an engine. You set the glass down. Something inside you is shifting. You're not afraid yet, but you are awake, and that might make all the difference. You're dressed now, nothing extravagant, just enough to not look like you were startled awake, even though you very much were. A thick coat over your nightclothes, boots you didn't lace fully, gloves forgotten somewhere in the flurry of movement. The corridor is busier now, not chaotic, just restless. doors opening and closing, voices low and tight, stewards moving faster than usual, but still trying to look unhurried. A woman passes you with curlers still pinned in her hair. Another man stands barefoot in a dinner jacket. It's all beginning to fray around the edges. You step back into the grand staircase area, and something is different. The chandelier overhead sways, just barely. Not enough to be alarming, more like a breathing thing. The ship has stopped moving forward. That much you're certain of. No vibration underfoot, no hum in the walls. You hadn't realised how much you'd come to depend on that rhythm until it vanished. You make your way out to the boat deck. The cold grabs at your throat this time. Not just crisp air, but sharp, hollow chill, like the breath of something ancient and watching. The sea around you is black glass, silent and utterly still. Overhead, the stars stretch forever. No clouds, no moon, just stars. You've never seen so many. They feel almost aggressive in their beauty. A few people are gathered near the railing, talking in tight circles, glancing toward the bridge. Officers move among them, their voices calm, telling everyone the same thing. Just a precaution. There's nothing to worry about. Please return to your rooms. We'll be underway shortly. Their faces are unreadable, but their shoulders, too squared, too stiff, betray the truth. Then you hear it. The soft clunk of a lifeboat being unfastened. Your breath catches. It's a subtle sound, not one most people would recognise. But you do. You've seen the schematics of the ship during a tour. You know where the davits are. You know that lowering a boat, even slightly, isn't something done for fun. Back inside, passengers are beginning to ask harder questions. A man demands to speak with the captain. A woman wants to know why the engines aren't running. Another wants a chair moved to the upper deck. She refuses to wait in the cold while standing. It's remarkable, really. The human capacity for denial. Even as stewards begin handing out life belts, some passengers refuse to take them, as if admitting they might be needed would make things worse. You return briefly to your room, your suitcase is open on the bed, halfway packed from earlier in the evening. It had been a lazy gesture, preparation for disembarkation in New York. Now you look at the contents differently. What do you take if you might not come back? What matters in a moment like this? You grab gloves, a tsukui, a small frame photo from your vanity. You slip your journal into your coat pocket, not because it's valuable, but because it feels like proof that this voyage was real. A little bottle of perfume too, because you might need to feel human even if the night turns savage. Here's your historical fact. There were only enough lifeboats on Titanic to hold about half the passengers and crew, roughly 1-200 spots for over 2,200 people. It wasn't an oversight. It was deliberate. The White Star Line believed that too many lifeboats would clutter the deck and disturb the sense of luxury. And besides, the ship was unsinkable, right? And here's a strange little fringe detail. Some passengers still didn't believe anything was wrong, even as the ship began to list. In one account, a woman insisted on bringing her full jewellery box, and was angry when told she had to leave it behind. Another man refused to board a lifeboat, saying he had paid for the whole voyage, as if death respected receipts. You make your way back outside, this time onto the starboard side. More lifeboats are being uncovered now. The crew has stopped pretending. The urgency is quiet but unmistakable. Officers shout commands, ropes creak, wood groans, the cold seeps into your bones, cruel and clinical. A steward passes carrying a bundle of life belts. One is thrust into your arms. You hesitate. It's ugly, bulky. It doesn't belong here, not in this world of velvet and crystal. But you put it on. It feels ridiculous, but not as ridiculous as drowning. The scholarly debate naturally is fierce. Did the ship's luxury dull its passengers' survival instincts? Were they lulled into complacency by white-gloved service and ornate surroundings? Or was the calm response a result of social training, Edwardian propriety stretched to its breaking point? Some claim the class system held fast until the very end. Others argue it crumbled quickly, revealing who people truly were when the stage collapsed. You look around, and here's what you see. A woman helping an older steward tie her belt. A man trying to light a cigarette with shaking hands. A child barefoot, being passed from one coat-clad adult to another. You hear music now, not in your head. Real music. It floats softly down from the deck above. The band is playing, not in panic, not in chaos, calmly, gently. The notes drift across the night air like a lullaby for a doomed dream. Some say they played Nearer, My God to Thee. Others say it was a waltz. Historians still argue about it. as if the song could somehow rewrite the ending. You close your eyes for a moment and just listen. It doesn't sound like the end, it sounds like defiance. Beauty held up like a lantern in the dark. You take a breath, deeper than usual, and when you exhale, it comes out like a prayer you don't remember learning. There's no shouting, no screaming, not yet. Just the creak of ropes, the rush of cold, the eerie grace of a ship trying to keep its dignity as it slowly, silently begins to die. You are not panicking, not yet, but you feel the edge approaching, and it's wearing diamonds. You're standing in line now, if it can even be called that, near Lifeboat 8, surrounded by a sea of pale faces wrapped in furs, shawls, mismatched coats hastily pulled over silk. The cold has finally settled into everyone's bones. There's no more pretending. The officers aren't explaining anymore. They're ordering. Voices barked above the wind. Women and children only, over and over. And for the first time, the words don't feel polite. They feel final. The luxury is still here, technically. Your gloves are lined in suede, the boots on your feet worth more than a third-class ticket, but it feels like a costume now. A stupid, flimsy disguise everyone agreed to wear to the end-of-the-world ball. Around you, first-class passengers are cracking, quietly. Some cry behind handkerchiefs, others stand like statues, eyes fixed on nowhere in particular. One woman sobs into her husband's chest and he strokes her hair while staring straight ahead, his face hollow. An officer calls your group forward. The boat is swinging gently on its davits, half lowered. You can hear the ropes creaking, groaning under weight. It doesn't look like enough, not wide enough, not deep enough. There's a hesitation in the air, like no one wants to be first. Then a steward gently takes an elderly woman by the arm and leads her forward. The silence breaks. Movement begins. You inch forward. Someone behind you mutters a prayer. Someone ahead whispers that they can't swim. You're not sure if that matters anymore. You glance behind, over your shoulder, and what you see will never leave you. Dozens, maybe hundreds now, gathered along the deck in small scattered groups. Some hold hands, some just watch. There's something connected in the way they're arranged, not panicked, not yet. More like mourners at a wake they haven't been told is theirs. You board the lifeboat with the help of 2 crewmen. It rocks slightly underfoot. Wooden benches, rough and narrow. A rope ladder dangles along the side of the ship, swinging in the cold wind like a ribbon on a ruined present. You take your seat, stiff and upright, trying not to make the boat tip with your weight. Others climb in after you, carefully, as if the boat might judge them. Here's your historical moment. Lifeboat 8 left the Titanic just after 1:00 a.m. It wasn't full, only about 28 people in a boat that could hold 65. Many of the first-class lifeboats weren't filled completely. The crew, untrained and overwhelmed, often launched them half-loaded out of fear they'd buckle under too much weight. Others were held back, waiting for more passengers who never came. Every empty seat, a ghost in the making. You hear someone say, "Where's the captain?" Another answers, "He's gone down with the ship." The truth is, no one knows yet. No one knows anything except that the Titanic is tilting a little more with each breath. As the boat begins to lower, you grip the sides instinctively. The descent is slow, agonizing. You pass deck after deck, A, B, C, the ship's polished layers sliding past like pages in a terrible story. You hear voices calling out. Someone screaming names, a child crying, and then the water. The boat splashes down and it's a sound you'll never forget. Cold slapping wood. Hollow, final. The men at the oars begin to row, awkwardly at first, then with more purpose. You glance up at the Titanic towering above, her hull stretching skyward, the windows still glowing with warm light. She looks impossible, not like a sinking ship, like a dream half-finished. Still beautiful, still regal, like she might lift herself back up at any second, and yet, you're pulling away. The air is full of sound now. Murmurs, shouts, the dull groan of the metal. A single note from the band drifts across the water. It breaks your heart. They're still playing. Still. Your quirky detail comes from the woman sitting beside you. She's clutching a small white bundle to her chest. You think it's a baby at first, but then she unwraps it slightly, and you see button eyes. It's a doll, not a child's toy. A fashion doll, life-size, dressed in a miniature version of the woman's own gown. Her name is embroidered on the hem. Georgina. She speaks to it in French, whispering comfort. No one blinks, no one questions it. Because all of you are holding something strange now, whether it's a doll or a perfume vial or a piece of someone's coat, a fragment of a life that was supposed to keep going. The scholarly debate here isn't even a debate anymore. It's just heartbreak. Why weren't the boats filled? Why weren't more people saved? There are reports of officers turning people away, of confusion and fear outweighing logic. And in some boats, like this one, an eerie calm. Too much calm. As if those aboard were too stunned to fight for more, or too polite. You're out in the open sea now. The Titanic looms behind like a mountain. But then, slowly, terribly, she begins to tilt. Not much, just enough. Oh. You can see it clearly from here. The bow dipping, the stern rising. The lights flicker once, then again, then they stay on. Because of course they do. The ship was never going to go quietly. Someone in the boat begins to sob. Another woman says, "Don't look!" But you do. You watch as the unsinkable begins to sink, one life at a time. One star at a time. And you realise in this moment that no amount of money, no number of servants or social rank or silk-lined luggage has changed a single thing. The water doesn't care. The ocean is not impressed. You're just another speck in the dark, bobbing in a boat too small, watching a miracle disappear. You want to scream, to shout, to sing, but all you do is breathe, because that's all you can do but yields. And for tonight, that is enough. You don't remember when the Titanic disappears. Not the moment she goes under, that you remember vividly. The groan, the shuddering lights, the roar of a ship breaking itself apart as water claims every hallway, every chandelier, every violin. But the after, that's hazier. Time does something strange after trauma. The silence is louder than the screams. The sea, once a stage, becomes a grave, and you are left in a lifeboat, rocking gently under the stars, surrounded by strangers who now know too much about you. There's no grandeur now. No velvet, no menus, just cold, endless cold. The kind that gets into your bones and starts asking questions about who you really are when no one's watching. You hold the side of the boat, fingers stiff and useless. Someone's moaning, someone else is praying, another woman is whispering names. You say nothing, because what could you possibly say? The sky doesn't change, the stars keep watching. Eventually, hours later, a light appears. A new ship, the Carpathia, smaller, plainer, but she's real, and she's coming. You're pulled aboard one by one, shaking, soaked, silent. The crew tries to speak gently, tries to ask names. Most of you just nod, or weep, or don't respond at all. Your journey ends not in triumph, not in style, but in survival. And that's what it really was like in first class on the Titanic. A floating world built to dazzle, to distract, to rise above the rest of the world. And then, one April night, it slipped beneath it instead. You lived, but the dream did not. And now you carry both, one in your memory, the other in your silence.